1 minute to blast off, and we don't have Councillor Page joining us until 5 p.m., I believe.
Wow, that's really bright. Maybe just a little, just a slight tone. Yeah.
Want one of those too, just in case?
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
We need some mood lighting in here.
We need presets named after each person.
Oh, nice.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday, March the 5th, regular meeting of the Nelson City Council. Hope everybody enjoyed today's lovely sunshine. It does seem that March did come in like a lion, and we'll see if it goes out like a lamb.
Can we have a little applause for the snow on the mountains that we're having build up, which is so good.
Yes, that is very good, and we just have to now encourage everybody to make sure that when they're out driving in this snow, they have properly equipped vehicles with snow tires, particularly if they're going into mountain passes or trying to perhaps access ski hills.
Yes. Good point.
So, that little segue, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sitixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I received no late items. If I could have an adoption of the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Item 5, we have adoption of minutes of the previous council meeting of January the 9th. Could I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Pinero. Did anybody notice any errors or omissions within the minutes of the January 9th meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries. As much as I tried to find a workshop or an educational session for this afternoon, we don't have one on today's docket. So moving on to item number 7, the city manager.
I'm going to, I'll share that I had, my conference in Vancouver, CAO's forum was very well done and lots of good information, lots of discussion around stress, etc., and how to manage that was one topic. And then I spent the rest of my time visiting children and grandchildren in Alberta, so that was nice to get away to them, and just thank my staff for doing a wonderful job while I was away, and I'll turn it over to one of the Chris's to give an update on some of the projects we're working on.
We're gonna go to both Chris's,
Okay.
so
I'll start.
we can start with either one.
So perhaps just an opportunity to update on a couple of things. I honestly can't recall. I feel like that's really close right now. I honestly can't recall if we updated. We do have some staffing changes that will be coming up. Sebastian Narcand, our Director of Planning, is moving on. Did I update at the last meeting? Okay, perfect. And then the one that I did not update on was Cecilia Jakes. She is got a really great opportunity with ACET, which is Accelerating Climate Energy Transformations, which is a group through UVic in the province. So she fortunately will still be staying in the community, but we're really excited for her to sort of be at the cutting edge of helping climate action at a community level with a focus on rural communities throughout BC. So really exciting, looking forward to hearing how that goes for her and seeing where we can work together on things. So you will see that position, I believe, is posted now. From a project perspective, a little bit of an update on the, yes, Councillor.
Director of Development Services not posted?
We're currently just working with some internal staff at this time to have a look at that, and we'll see where we go.
Okay.
Civic update on the roof repair project. We do now have our full design team in place. Just for a reminder, that sort of rhythm, I guess, goes that we get a design team together, they put the design together, and then from there we will be working to hire the contractors that will be doing the actual work. So yeah, pretty exciting to have the design team together. We're looking at sort of spring, late spring, early summer to be doing the work there to repair the roof. Yes, Councillor Woodward.
May I ask a question about that repair?
Sure.
So is the whole roof coming off? Or
No.
No. So
No.
It's an internal.
It is, yeah. So
repair?
it's an in situ repair. It's truly a repair, just replacing some of the components. It's actually more of a reinforcing the components that exist type of a project. The roof itself, like the barrier is in good shape. We recently, or not in the not too distant future, replaced that roof. So it's all in good repair. There will be some, potential, I think, we're still looking at how we'll get some of the larger components in, and they might go in through the roof, but that would not be a full roof repair. Again, we're just looking at the components that that are not, up to snuff, so to speak, and looking at bolstering those through design, more looking like sort of building similar pieces around it in various layperson's terms.
Yes.
Will there be upheaval for the operations, the groups that are in there, and we don't know that yet, or will we know that soon?
Yeah, and we will be reaching out to the stakeholders just as soon as we know our scheduling. They've known that the roof repair was coming and that there would be likely closures. We're working to understand the degree of those closures as well as the timing. So when I say degree, that means, for example, will the user groups on the lower level, i.e. Glacier Gymnastics, will they have to close given that there is a large concrete slab, between them and the roof structure? So we're doing a little bit of extra work to understand that, having our engineer look at that and seeing, whether we will be able to keep some of them operating. But yes, there will be disruption for certainly the dance umbrella and also the NCTS theater. As we work in there, quite simply, you can't be working on the, components up in the roof structure and not have people, potentially working underneath you, and it would just be unsafe. And then at some point, we're actually going to have scaffolding set up in there that will be supporting areas while we work on it. So, but yeah, so really positive that we're really happy that we've been able to get that together so quickly. Again, we started this and recognized that the pivot was to repair the roof so that we had sort of a viable building, and wanted to get that completed, all the work completed prior to next winter to limit the disruptions for the user groups in there, so we don't have to go through what we went through again this winter, which was, so far pretty smooth, but still certainly difficult for the user groups in there. So
Thank you.
and I'll just say, finally with that, our design team is actively working with NCTS on their project, because they're still going to be looking at doing, their renovations in there and looking where we can find efficiencies where, if we're up there, we can do, something that is relatively small action up there now that would save a lot of effort later. So we've just begun those talks with NCTS and their design team. So looking to find efficiencies where we can.
Thank you.
So that's the Civic. Moving on to the pier, you're going to see a lot of work starting to sort of crack off this week. I was just spoke with the company that's doing all the cladding there, so you'll see a lot of activity down there this week and for the next few weeks, which will be exciting to see that cladding going up and hopefully bring that one to completion in quick time. So beware that that's happening. And then finally, I just want to give a bit of an update on transit in general. So we do have the transit exchange coming up, as we've discussed as well. We've been working hard at making sure that we're ready to take on the Kootenay Lake West service as the operators for that service for the RDCK and BC Transit. And, I think that really this kind of just folds into the larger discussion around the improvement in the transit in our whole region, in that, not only, I think we'll be able to hopefully make some positive gains on the KLW side and be able to work, when we're operating both KLW and Nelson Transit, to be able to, sort of more easily find sort of reasonable solutions to transit problems that occur. We're looking forward to that. But as well, we are just keen to see how we can start to improve the service overall and really start advancing our climate goals on that transit front. The Transit Exchange will do a lot to support that, in that it will act as our hub for transit throughout the city. And just to give you a heads up, that you'll see sort of a larger general transit communication plan, and communications coming out talking about our approach and what's happening, and some added stops here or there that we're really looking forward to. And as well, in that will include some of the concerns, around the Transit Exchange going in there, was a loss of parking, and just how we will be meeting some of those, trying to make that as close to net zero as possible for losses by increasing parking on certain blocks, especially in the where the existing Transit Exchange is, just above Baker and Ward there on Ward Street. Looking at solutions for that area and a couple blocks above there. So.
Councillor Woodward, is it a follow-up or another question?
It's a question about transit.
Okay, you, then Councillor Payne, then Councillor
Councillor Payne,
Lockenberg.
first, would you like? Go ahead.
One of the questions I have is just around staffing. So it seems, are we at a full complement of bus drivers in the city of Nelson, or are we still, okay.
Yep.
That's what I had understood. I just heard some other things that were questioning that, and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure we're good.
Yep.
So,
It's certainly been, finding bus drivers has been a challenge, and
a lot of new
we
faces when I'm riding, so.
and the new service comes with a full complement of drivers as well. So they will become employees of the city of Nelson, and we'll be able to continue to work that. And we see opportunities to further make our service more resilient by having a larger pool of drivers to call from. So.
Yeah, and
That's great.
Just heard from our HR staff today that, we've been able to make contact with these drivers that are coming over from NextJet, and they seem to be really excited to come over here and be part of the city of Nelson. So that's a real positive. So we're trying to work through, how the collective agreements work, but we're working closely with the union on, how do we kind of bring those two groups together. And I think we're making good progress on our end there. The unions have to sort themselves out, but I'm sure that will happen. Whether that happens April 1st, we're getting down to, the short time to, make a lot of things happen. But, thanks to the Chris's and our transit staff, and this was a significant undertaking to figure out this whole system in that period of time that we had to do that. So it looks like we're gonna make it work. We'll probably be down to the last days of, but fortunately, obviously the drivers know their routes and they're hired into those. That probably from a practical point of view, it doesn't change much for them, so it's not like we're bringing in a bunch of new employees to learn new routes and familiarize them with things. So so that seems quite positive at this stage.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, my question was: Do you feel confident that we'll have the Transit Exchange up and running for September school season?
Yeah, that currently is within the plans of BC Transit. So their plans are to have it up and running by that time, before that time. So we'll see. We're still at that 60% design, right? So it's, functionally the design is largely, the machine is built and you're turning dials here and there now. So a lot of that work is done, and then it comes down to their procurement process, but the plan is to have it done sort of not well in advance, but, you know, their plan is not to be done, you know, August 31st. Their plan is to be done more in the summer, earlier summer.
Thank you.
Ms. Cockburn.
Chris, are you going to report on our meeting with BC Transit?
You can speak to it if you'd like, yeah.
Okay. Then a question then before I do that. Any update on the buses trips that got missed? I think the 10 and the 99 both had a few days where we had to cancel a few routes or a few trips. Nope.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thanks.
Councillor Payne.
This is sort of a tangential question, but the seniors advocate was here and certainly talked about transit. We know we have a lot of seniors who are interested in transit. One of the challenges that arose, and this is connected sort of to the transit hub, is seating. Is there any sort of plan to expand seating throughout the city at some of the more key bus stops where we're not already covered that way, which will make it more senior friendly? And I know it's tangential, I'm throwing it in the middle, but we're talking about transit, so.
Yeah, I can certainly speak to the Transit Exchange. They are very committed to providing, you know, a good amount of seating at the Transit Exchange itself. As far as that other stops, that's something we could certainly look into. You know, we are with the Transit Exchange going in, looking at, you know, a couple of small changes to stops around the city, but that's something that as we get up and running with this new service, I think, you know, we've now hired a transit supervisor. So with the growth of, you know, the overall transit service that Nelson is providing both to the city of Nelson and to the regional district, we've now resourced that with a transit supervisor, which I think will, you know, allow that person to be able to focus on, you know, improving those aspects of the service as well. So certainly something we can look at as we go forward.
That'd be awesome, thank you.
Okay, and Chris Jerry.
So you'll be seeing a lot of myself and Amy, I think at the next meeting. We'll report back on a few things. We've just completed, or our auditors have just completed their field work here. They ended on Friday last week. They still have more work to do back at their office, but we're very close to being able to show you a draft anyway of how we ended the year in 2023. So we'll bring that up, and I think it's important to have the opportunity to look at that before you create a 2024 budget or you finalize it. So we'll be able to have a look at those pieces. Also provide feedback, or provide you with the feedback that we received from our online, and a few people wrote in as well. So got a few handwritten ones, and we'll try and summarize those and provide some more statistics on how many people responded, how many people looked at the documents, downloaded, went to the website, that type of thing. Also want to bring forward or kind of bring back the budgets that we looked at and make some decisions on sort of moving forward with that. So we'll bring back the operating and capital just to have a final look at that now that you will have also had the feedback and been able to see 2023. I think you'll be in a place to be able to make a final decision on that so we can prepare some bylaws. We are quite a bit ahead of where we normally were timeline-wise, which is great, but it's still an awkward time being in limbo, sort of January, February, and you have projects that are in the draft budget. Staff are wondering, you know, is this something I can go ahead with? You know, we don't have a final budget yet, which is one of the reasons why it's always, preferable to do it earlier rather than later, set your budget, because if you wait until May 15th, then you're already almost halfway through the year, and now you're trying to catch up and get things done at the end of the year. There's a balance there of how to kind of bring things forward and make decisions with as much information as you can, but then also not have too much of the year go by. But that's one of the reasons why you do a 5-year financial plan, is that you essentially have a 2024 budget when you're doing your 2023 budget. You have 5 years there. But there were a number of projects that have come up that I think staff would like to start moving on, sooner rather than later. So I just wanted to kind of bring them up and, if there aren't any strong, they're all things that you've seen in the capital plan. If there isn't any strong objections to them, just giving staff that comfort that, they could probably start looking at some of those things. I know one that we have coming later on this evening is as far as the Tramway Society. So, we can park that one for now, and I think we'll see that later on this evening as a more formal RFD, but there were a couple other things that kind of came up. One was the fire services master plan. I think Kevin was meeting with the fire chief today, and they have a sort of a feeling that that's one that they would like to see kind of start at least moving on in the near term if possible. The other one is the parkade. So we had 200,000 set aside for the parkade to do some repairs and kind of maintenance type pieces on that. A lot of that's in a critical place and does need kind of to start that sooner rather than later. So they'd like to start making those kinds of repairs and things like that now if they can, now that the weather's getting better and you can do some of that work. There's a few vehicles as well that, we probably won't have them until long after a budget's approved, but the timelines for ordering vehicles. And if you don't kind of get your name in the queue here, you'd be looking at 2025 anyway before you see something come in. So speaking with Jody Cayley, our fleet manager there, and there's the garbage truck body, the police hybrid, and a used pickup truck for our new transit supervisor. Those were all in the capital plan. But those are ones that we would, he would want to action sooner rather than sort of wait until midway through the year and, probably not see delivery on those until next year if he doesn't kind of action those now. And one final piece is the Capitol Theatre. So they've secured a grant. It's a CBT SMART program grant, which allows them to do some energy efficiency work at the Capitol Theatre, weather stripping, insulation, kind of optimizing the HVAC system there. These things will all lead to future energy efficient, lower operating costs in the future. So it's all positive. We had $25,000 in the budget for the Capitol Theatre to do upgrades, I think primarily to the roof. But what we'd like to do is just pivot and use that to help support this grant program. I think they got 75,000. They'd need 25,000 from the city. So we already had 25,000 in the budget to do work at the Capitol. So it'd just be rebranding what that work is. And I think it's a great opportunity to leverage that funding further and again, lead to some lower operational costs and lower GHG emissions and kind of fulfill all those council priorities as well. So that seemed like a good opportunity to me. Those are kind of those things that are kind of out there and staff looking for a bit of confirmation on some of those pieces.
Councillor Payne.
Is there anything substantive that came from the community comments that would sway us from our path, which I think we are fairly committed to?
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to read all of them yet, and I think we're going to try and summarize them. So I couldn't comment on, different groups are going to have their different areas of interest that they would like to see. Like I say, I like to summarize that a little bit. There are some that you look at and you say, well, there's 8 of these that are all very similar, so they probably maybe got together and kind of came up with an answer. So you got to keep that in mind. But we'll have an opportunity in a couple weeks to kind of go through that, but nothing really jumped out at me as being a major piece. But
so then just for an understanding, I'm just wondering what would hold us back. Like what would be the downside of us moving forward on some of these things that you say we could start working on? And it would work better for staff.
Yeah, I see no downside, especially with the Capitol Theatre piece. The parkade, you really need, if you're going to own a parkade, you need to maintain it. So you have to put in that. And you almost think maybe there should just be an ongoing annual line item for parkade maintenance that just covers that. So that's something we probably want to look at for future, is just have that piece in there all the time. There's always going to be something. Tramway, like I say, you have this later on this evening to make a decision on that. The vehicles, this is just going to be ordering a vehicle. Nothing's going to be arriving until after you've passed the budget, so no downside on that as well, right? So,
Do you pay a deposit when you order them?
it's a good question. I don't think so. I think it's all when it gets delivered, but yeah.
If we're going to order
Yeah.
vehicles,
Yeah.
then we're committing to
Yeah,
purchasing.
no, I get it. I don't want to do it frivolously, but
Yeah, I just think, just in terms of your, nodding to go ahead with those, I don't think there's turning back once we start that process, so. I think on vehicles, we have a long-term replacement strategy, and this isn't anything new coming up. This is just when vehicles turn over and when they come up, and so it's not a new taxation thing or, et cetera. It's just business as normal. And we've, in your current financial plan for 2024, there would have been an amount for vehicle replacement. So it really is already in your financial plan. This isn't, we're just getting the specifics of some of the vehicles, but I don't know what we budget annually for equipment replacement, but it's all part of that ongoing. It's every year in that 5-year financial plan that we're anticipating we're replacing some vehicle, and we kind of get down to which specific one in that budget year. But I would say, personally, I think it's already in your financial plan, right?
Yep. Yeah. No, there was an amount in there for 2024 when we did a 2023 budget. So it's all included in there anyway.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Councillors, do you have any reports today?
CFO Jury alluded to the fact of doing this pre-planning and seeing how things are going throughout the year as we get moving to the next year's budget, because we have a 5-year budget. And I was hoping that we could somehow schedule this year some intermediate meetings with the police so that we can see how that budget is going and what's happening with the hiring, and as those things move forward or throughout the year, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Will do.
Council report? Okay, Councillor Lockenberg, lead us off.
I'll try to be quick. 2 things. The first, Chris and I met with BC Transit staff about the transit exchange to gather information. As the chair of the West Kootenay Transit Committee, I sometimes or often get people asking me questions, and then I try to explain how the process works or things work, and was feeling a few gaps in understanding what the process had been in public engagement around the transit exchange, especially with local businesses. And then, so Chris and I met with them and shared, discovered that they didn't really do additional engagement after the initial designs, which makes sense, I guess, in terms of the process. Council had approved those designs, and it's not BC Transit's responsibility or staff's responsibility at that point to do additional engagement since the design's largely been approved. However, there has been some changes down in that corridor that was, I think, worthwhile to update them on. For example, Amanda's opening, putting additional pressure in terms of traffic and loading and unloading in particular. So the concerns that the businesses had expressed were actually probably safety issues around bus turnings when the loading and unloading would be happening in front of doors, which is not where it's supposed to happen. To be honest, that's not where in the design. However, it's inevitable that it's going to happen there in some respects, and that there's some challenges with Amanda's. Anyways, the bottom line is staff did also have some potential challenges around how the buses will move into parking given the bump out of the crossing, the mid-block crossing. So it's actually a physics issue or whatever in terms of just the bus's ability to navigate in there and the potential for additional parking. So they shared that with us. We hadn't heard that before. And then we shared back with them some feedback. How that's going to inform the design, who knows? But it was this sharing. So I thought it would be important for council to know that we had that meeting and that information was shared. So potentially we might come back with some updates to that design. I have no idea. The second thing was we had a transit webinar with the West Kootenay Transit Council, or the chair, I can't remember their names exactly.
Got a new name.
They've got a new name. So it's the community or the regional transit group. The mayor was there, and Councillor Payne was in there as well. It was a presentation by Mark Short from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives about transit in British Columbia and a vision for transit that may or may not inform provincial policy going forward. Who knows? It depends on how well they advocate for it. But what came out of that, I think, was fairly interesting. The report's available to council to have a look at. I was shared was part of this webinar, and I shared the West Kootenay Transit Committee, the BC Transit Future Services Plan, and how that process works, and that we as a council are advocating to the province for an update to the financing model for the regional transit system from a 50-50 model to something that will allow us to advance the Transit Future Services Plan here in a way that doesn't overly burden local property taxpayers. I think there's some exciting movement there, potential there. I think the visions, the eyes are opening to the role that transit will play in an affordability. We're advancing our work on affordability across the board. So I think the webinar is available for anybody to download and see should they want to. I think that's it.
Thanks. Councillors, next. Councillor Payne?
Yeah.
We know you got something.
I got something. I went to, my normal events. The housing committee met. We did sort of look at the bylaw establishing the housing committee and the updates that have been made in the interim, and just wanted to check in and make sure that what we are, mandated to do is what we're doing. And so far it seems pretty clear that we are. One of the parts on there is reporting to council on a regular basis. So the mayor suggested this is sufficient as a report. Some people on the committee think that maybe there should be a slot that they fit into, that they come and do sort of an annual update. So we may work towards that.
I believe that was part of the discussion, Councillor Payne, that I said that they should come as a presentation to the cow as a workshop or...
Yeah, and it's something that we have been discussing in the past, so it's something that I just wanted to let everyone know. If there's any other suggestions for how we could communicate that information, that'd be great. So it was great to have the mayor there at that meeting. We did talk about the housing conference. I also on building, I did go to the builders breakfast. So the RDCK, in conjunction with the Community Energy Association, had a breakfast for builders around step code and all the energy efficiency legislation that's coming in. It was extremely well attended. It was great to see. And they brought in a speaker from Vancouver who has many different roles, but the best thing about it was he was a really engaging speaker, because some of that information, and we've had those presentations on a number of occasions, can be a little on the dry side and a little technical. So he just really engaged the audience, and I think people walked away from that just with a better understanding. And I know our staff has done a lot of work in engaging as well, but just moving that ball forward so that there's much higher adoption in the building community, especially with all the other new legislation that's coming forward. The last one that I want to report out on is that I did attend the Central Kootenai Food Policy Council meeting, which is a group of individuals from around the basin, pretty much, that I'm sure Councillor Woodward is familiar with. They meet 3 times a year, but they do some pretty amazing work around food security and the connecting us to the local growing industry. So there were, it is people from everywhere, governance, not-for-profits, interior health, and a variety of other organizations. So it was really great, and they were very interested in what Nelson was doing, and I did report in on some of the aspirations that are in Nelson Next, and many of them were aware of the report that was done for Nelson in 2014 and in the Sustainability Pathway to 2040. So I think it's a great place to be connected into, and not that we're going to become a food secure community anytime soon, but I think it's something that we need to be really, really aware of with our isolation and climate change. Those are some of the highlights for me. Lots of things going on, but those are the key ones that I want to bring forward.
Councillor Pinero.
Yeah, mine's pretty informal. I just had what I thought was a great sort of interaction with a local organization, and I thought I'd just highlight it because I know they're sort of perpetually troubled, but so there's a bit of a story to it. I have a boxing club, some people know that, and we set goals for ourselves and as a team and as athletes and whatnot, and one of the, just as part of that process, I was talking to my team about upcoming events, and the Junior Olympics will be held in Senegal, I think, in 2025. So some of these kids are potentially going to go to that. And I was sort of announcing it because I thought that was really cool. And I just got blank looks, and somebody's like, "Where's Senegal?" And I was kind of like, okay, well, it's not like fun to make fun of children. So I was just like, all right, well, any guesses, right? And the first guess was South America, followed by Europe, followed by North America. And then I just couldn't handle it anymore. And and so I was feeling a little bit upset about that. I just feel like there's something missing, really, in the way things should be. And then shortly after that, my wife organized, along with Greg Morast from the Civic Theater, they were doing free screenings at the Shoebox for Black History Month. And she organized one of these for the boxing club, and we went as a team. We went, I have about 20 boxers, and we all went in there, and we watched. The ages are from like 10 until 30. We went in and we watched Power of One, which is a great movie, but I remember from as a kid, it's pretty heavy. Mm-hmm. And before the movie started, we sort of did a little talk, like in the same theme as like, where is Senegal? Like, has anybody ever heard of apartheid? And there was one person on my boxing team who had heard of apartheid. That person is like 30 and has the advantage of being Dutch. And everybody else drew a blank. It's pretty incredible. And so we watched this movie, and I was I didn't know what was going to happen, because I thought maybe these kids just don't care. Maybe they're like immune to social issues or any sort of political intelligence. And yet, during the movie, they were super engaged. There was quite a few of them that cried. It's a pretty heavy movie. And afterwards, they were just buzzing about it. And there was a new sort of interest in the world and a realization about, some of the things that go on. And I think an ability, we talked about it, an ability to, by knowing history, to not be perpetually confused about what's going on right now. And I think it's a very relevant and valuable lesson. And I just wanted to thank the Civic Theater for the role that they play in the community. I know that they struggle financially at times, and I think maybe we take for granted, and I do myself. Sometimes I'm not particularly into superhero movies, and sometimes it just feels like an endless superhero movie that's playing there, but there's other things going on there, and it's really, really valuable. I just saw the difference, and I don't think I would have had the opportunity to sort of present those kids with that experience without their help. So I just thought a little plug for the programming there, for Greg for being, you know, a brave teacher in the community, and just a thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Wonderful. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pinero. It's really interesting about how easy it is to forget or to not be taught, even like what happened 50 years ago. We're just really stuck in the present. My one report is I went to Emergency Management Committee. Happens quarterly. And there's a new emergency manager, Stefan. And he's very engaged and wonderful. And so he's picking up where John left off. And I think, you know, what really I left there feeling like this. There's a lot of like tying together of between the RD and the city and multiple stakeholders. So this constant kind of emergency management mindset, which I feel like is so important these days. And just not kind of letting our guard down and getting complacent, that we have to always be like ready for what could be and prepared. Of course, one of the big topics was our water, and that was a couple weeks ago, and at that time it was a little bit nervous, like people were a little nervous. It was pretty low, but we have gotten a fair amount, and GM said that we're sort of on a low average now. So it's looking, if we get some more snow in the next month, we're looking pretty good, which is very positive for going into the summer. So yeah, it was a great meeting. It's always good to see all the different emergency services managers there. And it's always great to be in the EOC and knowing that we have that ready to go at any time for any emergency. So thank you very much.
Any other councillors? Councillor Page.
Yeah, so you haven't seen me for a while, but I did want to thank Councillor Lautenberg for stepping in at the Regional District at our last meeting, as well as the special budget meeting the following day. And I'm sure you guys all got a fulsome report on that. And so I'll cover a few things inside of committee. We just completed the first round of our parks budget. This is a smaller requisition of about $1 million, but we are looking at a 23% increase, which is in line with the 5-year financial plan. It's a little bit less actually than what we were expecting. There's some shorter term cost drivers there. If you see the financial plan, they'll fall off in 2026, 2027, but they certainly are being realized this year, as well as some contribution to reserves and some additional parks and bylaw enforcement staff that the board has passed at the larger table and is being divvied up across all parks and services, and ours being the biggest park service with the most number of parks. But we're looking at adding about $200,000 to that service. Some of that will come off in 2026. The other thing is I did want to extend the gratitude of the Columbia River Treaty Local Governments Committee. The city was able to lend out some hardware to help facilitate that meeting being done here at the Prestige at the end of February. And so we were very thankful to be able to use the Owls and be able to have a meeting and bring in our remote people. And then other than that, a bunch of stuff that isn't directly related to this job. So do you have any questions?
But it was fun.
It was all fascinating. I did go to the first part of the Builders Conference. We were booked at the same day down at the Prestige.
Yes.
Were you going to share the announcement regarding the Foundry Center landing in the West Kootenay?
Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, the province has announced that there's going to be a bunch of more Foundry Centers, which is mental health resources for residents, youth, aged 12 to 24. And the concept is an all-in-one stop for folks of that age. And one of the locations is West Kootenay. So very excited about that coming.
They're called Foundry
toward
Centers?
us. Foundry, yeah.
Foundry.
Foundry's already established,
Yeah.
but the fact that there will be more centers and one of them is West Kootenay is very exciting. There's been a lot of collaboration among like the family practitioners, the college, mental health and substance use. And so it's a big deal.
Okay,
Yay.
awesome.
Councillor Lockwood.
A quick question for Councillor Page, or I guess Tate, but probably Page, through the chair. Somebody came up to me for the weekend, and I had heard this before too, that there's been an increasing number of challenges with the EV charging parking down at the NDCC. That people are non-EVs are parking in the EV parking,
Yep.
and I wasn't able to respond about, because I don't actually know, how does enforcement happen there, or what are we doing about it to make it so that that doesn't keep happening?
He can answer that.
Yeah.
So the recognizing parking challenges of all stripes a number of years ago over a process in the last term, the RDCK has contracted the City of Nelson's bylaw department to do checks during business hours predominantly. And so there have been challenges around the EV chargers, recognizing, of course, that strip of land where those chargers sit is all City of Nelson versus RDCK parking lot. So while Bylaw is down there, Bylaw will certainly, and staff can speak to this, will certainly do checking. But the big issue that I would say that I notice is during busy nights at the arena when there's a lot of challenges, and that's usually we don't have Bylaw come through after kind of like 4:30. We have, you do the marking, there's a couple hours you're supposed to be there, and so by the time we've come through and circled at the late afternoon, we're just expecting to be into the evening at that point. So there has been communication just in looking at signage. Staff might want to speak to that and whether we're moving forward with getting some signage up there in terms of maybe considering people could call and get towed for that kind of thing. Or if the issue continues to persist, we may want to have to send our own staff down there on the evenings. But I think these are conversations staff would want to action. Stuff has been sent over.
There is,
Sure.
and we have received, I think all of us have received a few online submittal emails, and so it's in the works. So once those come into the office, then usually staff are seeing them and taking, doing what's necessary. It is kind of strange because it is that mix of RDCK and City of Nelson. And the other thing is, just to remind people, is that just because you own an EV, you're not supposed to park in front of that thing either unless you're charging your EV. And that's also been problematic where I've seen EV vehicles parked in front of those that aren't charging. It's not a free space if you happen to drive an EV. So all sides of this equation are at fault about what's going on down there. But Councillor Whitworth.
Thank you, through the chair. Would like when talking about signage, I mean, would it be like only EV parking or you'll get towed? Like, is it that?
It's not even only EV parking. It's
Well,
only
sorry,
EV charging.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Only EV charging or you'll get towed. Like, would it be like that kind of direct
Well, I
action?
think that's one of the suggestions, but I would really kick that to staff to kind of answer the question, what are we, because it is city land, city resources, the RDCK bylaw contract we have for our parking enforcement, honestly, there's an argument to be made, doesn't even really have impact on city land with a city charger that happens to be adjacent to the RDCK parking lot. So I would put the question to staff as to what are we considering to alleviate the situation, which is certainly prevalent in the evenings when there's an event. And I have certainly got a number of emails and tags and things of people who have gotten to the situation where they're there. It's a couple pickups.
I think if we could leave this with staff for the time being, because it's
Yeah.
like, it's one that bubbles up every now and then, as does parking in
Just-
general.
Just a point of clarification for the times that I've driven an EV and you're depending on a fast charger. Because
Yeah.
you're coming into a place, you depend that there's either somebody charging and you can wait in line. They're not just somebody parked there. And if that is the case, you can be in a lot of trouble. So I would say that, I think this would be a good avenue to really enforce that, no parking.
Yeah, so we'll look at our authorities. We hear you. I don't think it's probably not, anyway, we'll just have to look at the options there, and certainly signage that this is a tollway zone is probably an easy, one of the easier ones. How do we enforce that in the after hours? We can look at what those options. I know if you're in Vancouver or somewhere and you're parked in a no parking area, tow trucks tend to come by and tow you away, and I don't know if it's as easy as that to have a tow truck. There's a number, you can phone up the towing company, they will come. We can authorize that they have right to, if there's a car illegally parked there, that they have the right to do that. I'm not sure if it's that simple, but you just need a couple people's cars to be towed away and people stop parking there.
Okay, so I had a few things to report, but I'm going to take a pass because I did ask a staff member to come in specially to address our first item of business for the evening, and that's the Bylaw 12A. And because we have no requests and we have no delegations, and it's a little bit early to go to dinner, so we have before us the new provincial residential density requirements. And we've talked a number of times just in open meetings and while we've been reporting about meetings we've been to, like the housing summit and such, in regards to these new requirements that must be put in place, at least the initial ones by June 30th of 2024. And so in front of us tonight, we have to pass the first two readings of the zoning amendment bylaw and 3 readings of the off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw. The staff have done a great job in putting this before us in our package with backgrounders regarding these 2 bills. There isn't, we can't modify this. This is the provincial government's legislation, so we have to follow suit. We have both Sebastian Arcane, the head of the planning department, and Natalie, I'm not going to say her last name here, to do the presentation. So hopefully, if anybody has any questions, they'll have them also ready. And council, just so you're aware, I am aiming for a 5:45 recess. If your questions are more complicated, we will bring this item back after dinner.
It's frozen. Right? Oh, wait, there we go. Okay. Can you do that? Yes.
That's good enough.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight we're just going to do a quick presentation and we'll open up the floor for some questions, but just kind of a reminder of kind of where this Bill 44 comes from and what the intent is and other key steps that we're going to have to be doing as a municipality over the course of the next few years. So Bill 44 is what is referred to small-scale multi-unit housing. I think is it SMU or SMA?
Shmoo is what they were saying.
Shmooey.
Shmoo.
Yeah, well, you can call it whatever you want.
You
But,
can call it whatever.
and really just to kind of backtrack, and I know I've presented some similar information to council, maybe December or January, just to kind of build it up to how this kind of came about. And it really started in spring of 2023, where the province came out with the Homes for People Action Plan, and within that plan, it had a series of items that the province wanted to do, and really it's about the getting more housing is really what it's all about. And then they kind of started unrolling that plan really quickly, and in fall of 2023 is when they introduced legislation on short-term rentals, on the small-scale multi-unit housing, and on transit-oriented development. So those are 3 different bills, and later tonight we'll talk about the short-term rentals. And then in December 2023 is when they released their provincial policy manual, and that kind of detailed what the province is expecting municipalities to do in terms of changing their zoning bylaw. And that followed in January 2024, where they've distributed some money to local governments. So we did receive our money it's really about helping municipalities implement some of these changes. Early 2024, Natalie, did we get that guidance for the housing needs report yet?
Oh, no.
No, I don't think so. Okay. Yeah. So we're still waiting on that. And really what we're going to talk about today is around the zoning bylaw to updates to accommodate some of these new regs. And that's due by June 30th. We're just a bit ahead of it. And on January 1st, 2025, we need to complete our interim housing needs report. Again, we're already starting that process, so that's not anything to stress about. And by the end of 2025, update our OCPs, our OCP, and really you got to make sure our zoning bylaw aligns with that housing needs report. So again, we've already started our OCP, so we're ahead of all of this. So I know a lot of municipalities are kind of stressing to try and keep up with all of this, but we feel like we're in a pretty good spot right now. So what is this all about? And essentially is all municipalities above 5,000 need to allow for 3 units on lots less than 280 square meters or 4 units on lots over 280 square meters. There's a couple more regulations, but for Nelson, that's all we need to know for now. And that...
Jane?
Sorry, when you're saying restrictive zones, are you talking about R1 or?
Yeah, I'll jump right to that.
Okay, sorry.
So what is a
Thank you.
restrictive? What is a restrictive zone? And really, that's defined by the province, and it's essentially a single-family dwelling zone that would not allow an accessory dwelling unit or secondary suite, or a zone that restricts the residential use to detached single plus 1 ADU, duplex plus 1 ADU. So essentially, what we had to do, we had to go through our zoning bylaw to assess what zones would kind of fall under restricted zones. So for us, it was the R1 zone, which allowed in some cases 3 units. The R3 zone was allowed unlimited density, but there was just I guess the rest of those 4 other zones are just technicalities, which we figured it'd be just good to fix as part of this. But the bigger change is in the R1 zone. The other piece that we thought would make sense to change at the same time is our off-street parking bylaw, and is to go to 1 parking stall per unit. That just is a pretty easy fix for us. We feel it makes a lot of sense, and it's already been identified in various policies and plans that we have. So we feel that packaging that together makes a lot of sense. Now, what is not changing for us at this point in time is we're not looking at setback, building heights, lot coverage. Those are things we're going to look at, but let's go through the OCP and look at policy guidelines or guidance to inform how we want to change that. So park that for now, focus on these. And I mean, at the end of the day, probably noticed in the report, I think for us in our R1 zone, we're talking about roughly 1 additional unit per lot. We're not expecting all of a sudden everything gets converted to 4 units. We kind of see this as a gradual thing. So what happens now? So tonight is where we introduce the bylaws. This is a bit different, where usually a zoning bylaw you would hold a public hearing, but with these regulations, the province is specifically informing us that we must not hold a public hearing. So no public hearing is required. If council moves forward with the first 2 readings tonight, then we would adopt the bylaw on April 24. And then we would give a notice to the Minister of Housing that we have completed that. We would continue to focus on our OCP, get that completed by early 2025. So we're a year ahead. And within that document, we're expecting to have policies that will inform changes to our zoning bylaw. It is also fairly common once you go through a major update of your OCP, the next year you focus on your zoning bylaw to make sure that those jive. And we'll also be looking at amenity cost contribution bylaw and development cost contribution bylaw. So some of those monies that we've received from the province, we're slotting them to find some help to figure that out. Is it worth doing in Nelson? And if so, how do we want to do it? How do we want to roll it out? And then in 2025, once the OCP is wrapped up, we can start focusing on zoning bylaw review and make sure that it is consistent with the provincial regs. So I think that's it for the kind of quick update of what this is all about and what is being recommended to you tonight.
Questions, Councillor, or anybody want to put a first resolution on the table?
I'll move.
Okay, moving recommendation number 1. Is there a seconder for recommendation number 1? Councillor Payne, Councillor Lockenberg, if you don't mind.
That the zoning amendment bylaw number 3593/2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
That's been moved and seconded. Are there any
Mayor?
Yes.
Just one clarification. What's the implication on our heritage properties, residential properties in Nelson?
So that you can ask for an exemption, but our analysis of it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There's only 1 residential property under private ownership that falls under heritage protection.
Yeah, which I guess that's the question. Is I would think most people in our community would say there's a number of properties that are, important heritage properties that I think we've lost some right to, or didn't get the opportunity to, maybe try to protect some of these, heritage homes in our community.
Block. Okay. The only thing I'll add is you had to have the heritage protections in place prior to the legislation coming into effect. So we did lose that opportunity. Just
wondering if there's an opportunity for council to, identify that as something that maybe the province needs to re-look at. It would be a shame if Nelson lost a lot of these heritage properties because people wanted to develop fourplexes on them or whatever. So,
I mean, one thing to consider is a lot of those properties that are deemed to have certain heritage qualities are in the R3 zone, which we have allowed unlimited density for a number of years now, and it hasn't triggered, some demo and reconstruction. Yeah, I'm hoping in some of those cases, because they sit on such small lots, it might be challenging to get into something else, and I think that's why the unlimited density might not have been picked up. But at the same time, it could present more opportunities to, reconvert them while keeping the footprint and finding ways to reconvert them. So I guess there's two sides to that coin. Yeah.
Okay, recommendation number 1 has been moved and seconded. Councillor Payne, you have a question. Page, you have a question.
Yeah. I'm going to pick up on that. The extraordinary circumstances exemption possibility, given that Nelson has the history, including the book on heritage renewal, it's kind of baked into our community a bit stronger, I would say, than a lot of others, that if maybe this is a place we would want to at least ask for the ability to re-update that heritage register. Like, I'm not sure if we want to stop this process here today, but I do think we want to ask the minister and point out to the minister, to Minister Kang, that Nelson sits in a unique situation that has been documented, that has books written about it, that we see an issue here about needing to update the heritage registry now that there's a new paradigm. So maybe that's a motion we can add to the end of this to send off a letter and ask for some consideration on that, but I don't think we're in most communities in that respect. And so we should ask.
I don't see that as a problem, Councillor Page. I'm a bit confused about the concept of heritage. Like, I might own one of those homes. Like, I don't have to build, like, I mean, the key thing about this legislation is that you're now allowed to build up to 4 units. Nobody has to build 4 units. Nobody's gonna come and knock on my door and tell me I've got room for 8, and now I have to build 8. Like, nobody's making me densify the property I currently own. So nobody is saying that if I live in a heritage home, I now have to make it into a 4-plex, right? So there's still the issue of this is not, like, this isn't a new rule that now every lot has to have 4 houses on it, even if it was raw land. That's not what these bylaws are saying. It's the
Yeah, I
potential to
understand
go to 3 or 4 or 2. And we know our own experience is that we were already allowing people to do 3 on an R1. And there isn't 3 on every piece of property that I've seen being developed in the last while. I mean, there's a lot of people are putting in suites because they know that they're mortgage helpers. So I think we need to protect heritage properties, but I don't know that by passing this bylaw changes that. Am I mistaken, staff? I'm just confused about.
Yeah. I don't think we're saying don't pass the bylaw. It's just, should we look to, this would be the normal rule, but if we had those properties designated prior, that person now doesn't have a right to knock that house down and add 4 units, right? That's really the thing you're doing is right now that person with that heritage home has the right to knock it down and add 4 new units. And, that may or may not happen in Nelson. Hopefully we haven't had an experience of a lot of people doing that, but as prices go up and pressure goes up and all those things, certainly go to larger communities. I was in Calgary last week, and every one of those, little 1950s homes they're bought, they're torn down the next day, and a 4-plex or a duplex is in its place, and that maybe that's kind of what you want to see. But if you want to protect some of those, then asking for that ability as a local government to be able to do that within your community, and we have lots of opportunity for people to add in other properties, and we have some sensitive sort of heritage property that is the character of our community. So we're not suggesting not to go ahead with this. It would be a follow-up. Can we have some additional tools in the future to manage those things?
Councillor Tate.
Yeah, I'm just gonna riff, but I'm curious about any kind of direction about preserving original structures, even if you can densify the rest of the property. And maybe that's a piece of the puzzle. And also allowing changes to where you subdivide based on original structures. So that you could just preserve those older buildings in the future. And maybe it's not necessarily folks that maybe own them right now, but like CIO said, in 27 years, as the population turns over, and the possibility of folks coming in and being like, oh, great, I've got a 4 lot, I've got a corner lot, I can build 16 or whatever, but there's space to build some smaller ones within that 4 lot, that we have quite a lot of those in Nelson. I'm curious if that's a possibility of inquiring about those sorts of.
I think there's a lot to unpackage when we start talking about heritage protection. So I think maybe we could have a separate session around what it means, because we talk about registry, we talk about designation, protection, and we kind of all assume they all mean the same. They all mean different things. And sometimes compensation is required when you do designate properties. So I think it's probably, I wasn't expecting to maybe go down that route tonight. But I think if council wants to talk more about it, we have we have a heritage working group. We have some really knowledgeable people within that group that I'm sure would be happy to have a workshop with council, talk about different strategies with other municipalities, because I think it's a really important topic. But yeah, there's a lot to unpackage there, and I think it'd be good to talk about different nuances, and if we go a certain route, what does that mean? How do you inform the community, and how do they get involved? So maybe be happy to set that up with Sarah at council's convenience.
I see that as that's what we will do. So that we can understand that, because there is a lot to actual heritage designation, so.
Maybe I'll also add that all of council's other legislation is still in place. So with the SMU legislation in place or before it, if there's a demolition permit for any building that was a heritage structure, we could bring it to council and we could withhold that building permit for 60 days. And in that time, council could designate it, presumably, but you would have to compensate. So that rule will still be in place if we are worried about the loss of heritage structures.
That's good to know. See, this is why we have to have a workshop on this, because that's an interesting piece that I'm pretty sure that most of us didn't know was there. So we've had.
Oh, I have a different other question, but
Yes.
I think Councillor Payne also had a question.
Okay, Councillor Payne.
Do you want to go?
I'm fine either way. Is this leading on from the heritage? Because
It's
I'm going
separate.
down a different road here.
It's slightly separate.
I'm going down the road into a parking spot.
Oh, okay.
So I'm
Go
just
ahead.
really, I'm just really interested to know, the average Nelson household owns 1.19 vehicles. So I'm interested if that number is going up, down, or relatively stable. I don't know if that's information that you have. I'm trying to consider that we're putting in this bylaw, and the province is recommending to remove parking minimums, as is Nelson Next. So when I look at that, if you're looking at, and I'm understanding this correctly, right? So if you're putting 4 dwelling units, so is that 4 different household residents, whether they're suites or additional units? So that's 4 parking spots. So that is a significant amount of real estate on any lot, which is, according to the legislation, they point out that it's restrictive.
And I believe that it's not restrictive in terms of our policy, because if I'm not mistaken, I'm sure staff will clarify this. Currently, a unit would require 2 parking, and we are actually, we are waiving our minimum, because I believe our minimum is 2 per unit, and we are now looking at, with this bylaw, going to 1 per unit.
Yes, so we are
So we are
decreasing
reducing.
it. Yeah, no, we are
Correct.
reducing it. I understand that really, really well. So we're going from a possible 8 on a lot, which means the houses would be very small, to, to 4, which still takes up a significant amount of real estate on a lot in the city. So I'm just interested if we have that information. I'm presuming and hoping, as environmentally focused, that the vehicle ownership numbers are going down. And if this is something that we're creating for the future, then it might be a 0.5 vehicle per household as opposed to a 1. Just putting it out there. What is the trend?
Well, we did a one-pager for the OCP on traffic. And I was just quickly
I'm
looking to see
excited
if we
to
had
read that.
those numbers available, but it did say there was a decrease, 13.9% decrease in drivers aged 16 to 21. So we are seeing that trend. But I don't know about car ownership overall in Nelson, but we could see if that data was available.
Okay. I mean, we'll know what it was. It'll be possible to find out what it was before. Sorry, and I didn't mean to derail it, but I do think that, we're talking about parking in a variety of different ways, whether how much to charge for it when you're in the city center and around town, and what it is on lots. So I just want to make sure we're aware of the hopefully decreasing use of personal vehicle ownership.
Councillor Tate, we have recommendation number 1 on the floor, and you have a question.
Yes, do we have a tree retention bylaw? Or do we have anything about trees when people go to redevelop? And is that something we have to consider as well as we implement the new policies?
We have a landscaping bylaw, we have lot coverage, things like that, but no, we don't have a tree preservation bylaw. We are going to have an intern, well, she is currently working with us, but she will be coming in this summer, working on a master's project on nature-based solutions, which will look at tree canopy, urban forestry, things like that. So those are things to look at. I think it's a good question. I think that's why we're not pushing at increasing lot coverage at this moment, right? We want to kind of weigh that out. So density is one thing, but how does it fit within the overall context, and what are other pieces that we need to look at? So we don't have it is the short answer, but things that, as we continue to progress in planning, those are all things that we look at.
Thank you.
Okay, we have recommendation number 1 on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor that the zoning amendment bylaw 3593/2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? And that carries. Council, I just want to test the water here. We are not eating dinner in this evening, and to afford us time to get to a restaurant that we chose that's at the other end of town, because the next 2 pertain to the same amendment and bylaw. I'm wondering whether or not there's any flavor to ask for recess now, and we'll come back and finish these resolutions at 7 p.m. So that's been moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor of recess until 7, and that carries. So we'll see everybody back in council chambers at 7 for the
90 days. And you'll note that the principal residence requirement, as well as the requirement to post a business license number on your listing, already exist in our current short-term rental regulations. So for current short-term rental operators, there shouldn't be too much change. For the City of Nelson tourist accommodations, this is a bit similar. At the municipal level, the city will continue to apply the general business license regulations for rentals of 31 days or less. And at the provincial level, the new requirements will be the primary residence requirement, posting the business license number on the listing, and registering with the provincial registry. These regulations will apply to rentals of less than 90 days. The main difference with the short-term rentals is the primary residence requirement that did not exist at the municipal level. Now the legislation comes...
Can I just ask for a point of clarification? So you were just talking about the tourist accommodation. So that's the new change. So the slide previous to the last one was what we would know as short-term rentals, and then the next one is the tourist accommodation. So that's
right.
The bigger change. So when you say NA, that just means this bylaw is not changing that item.
It's not applicable.
In place.
Yeah, they're not subject. So for tourist accommodation, that offers rental of more than 32 days or more, there's no municipal regulations. And then at the provincial level...
Just had business licenses.
That's
for those
right.
individuals.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, no, got that. I just wanted the clarification of the tourist accommodation on that second slide. Okay.
Okay, so the exemptions, we know that hotels and motels are not subject to the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act. The province said that they would provide a definition of hotel and motel. The province also provided a list of other types of accommodation that could be exempt from the primary residence requirement. For example, strata hotels, timeshares, home exchanges, lodges, etc. You can view a full list of these exemptions on the provincial website. Note that if a type of accommodation is exempt from the principal residence requirement, it still has to comply with all other applicable municipal and provincial regulations. Local governments also have an option to opt out of the provincial principal residence requirement if they meet the following criteria. So if they are a resort municipality, if their population is less than 10,000, or if the vacancy rate is less than 3% for 2 consecutive years. The City of Nelson does not meet any of these criteria. So we are not eligible to submit a request to opt out. And last but not least, local governments are not responsible for enforcing the provincial legislation, including the provincial principal residence requirement. The province will enforce the legislation through the provincial compliance unit. So this brings us to the proposed bylaw amendments. To align with the provincial legislation, staff is proposing to amend the business license bylaw and zoning bylaw. The business license amendment relates to the short-term rental regulations. It removes the option of having the principal residence requirement waived for the 4-month licenses. To note that in 2023, we only had 1 license issued under that exemption, and same for 2024. The zoning bylaw amendments relate to tourist accommodations. We are updating the definition of tourist accommodations to rentals of 31 days or less instead of 30 days and less. This is to be consistent with the short-term rental definition. And the other zoning bylaw amendment would allow an older single-family house in the C1 zone that currently has a commercial use to revert back to a residential use. The intention is that residential homes in the C1 zone that have been used as short-term rentals have the option of reverting back to residential use if the provincial regulations do not allow for short-term rental operation anymore. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councilor Payne?
Just a point of clarity, it's 3% and above? The vacancy rate needs to be 3% and above for 2 years? Okay,
Yes.
sorry, I thought you said less than 3%.
Greater than.
Greater than, yeah.
Great, sorry.
I think Valerie did say less than, but.
Okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to make,
We
you know,
made
it's
that
really
right.
clear. When was the
We
last
made that
time we
right
ever
here.
saw anything like that? Yeah, we are, I don't, yeah, certainly not.
Councilor Page?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Can you just clarify for me what the thought process is around not requiring business licenses for all the SRTs? STRs? Right now,
Sorry, what do you
in the report, it says that stays over 32 to 89. And if I read the report correctly, it's the 14 different providers that are doing 4 months. Well, anything over 30 days, they do not require a business license, but we'll continue to do that. So why would we not just expect all STRs operators to have business licenses?
I think that's something that was explored when we implemented the new short-term rental regulations in 2018, I think. So at this time, like we don't have to align with the provincial regulations to change our definition. So we didn't explore that, and we felt like at the municipal level to have people providing stays of less than 31 days being considered short-term rental was adequate, and not, changing the definition to something a little bit longer. We felt like it was not the same impact, for example, on residential neighborhoods, so we left it as is.
No.
Councilor Payne?
I guess one of the other things that I need to understand a little better is, I think you said that the province will be providing the definition of hotel and motel. So I'm uncertain why we would want to, like, we're going to 3 readings tonight, and the bylaws to take effect immediately upon the final reading. But isn't it important for us to know that definition? Are there not a couple of properties in town that might fall under that? I know there's one guest house that reached out to us.
That won't change anything, though. This is a provincial requirement, so it won't affect our bylaw. Like the bylaw amendments, our regulations are not affected by the way the province defines hotels and motels.
Okay, so,
They're, if I'm correct, they're exempted at the provincial level. So
That's
if I'm
right.
classified as a hotel, we can, regardless of what we call it, they'll be a hotel and they'll be exempted from the regs.
In the meantime, we're changing what
In-
tourist accommodation means in our zoning bylaw because, fill in the gap there, because that's the part where there's like a confusion.
So that's to comply with the new regulations, right?
I think the big piece here
is-
for us, it's mostly how, correct me if I'm wrong, Val, but I think it's mostly, we're doing a bit of housekeeping changes to our bylaw, and like 30 to 31 is just, I think that was just more so a typo of
yeah.
being inconsistent. And the allowing properties that are basically a single-family dwelling in the C1 zone is if the province were to say, no, you cannot operate, you don't meet our criteria, probably the primary residence being the main one, they're not going to be stuck by saying, well, it is functionally a residential property, but now I have to convert it to commercial. So we wanted to get ahead of that in case somebody gets stuck, then they can bring it back to a residential property and at least rent it as such, as a longer term residential property. But I don't think the definition of hotel or what that is really affects anything that we're proposing to change today.
So I guess the question is, when do we have to comply with the STR regulations?
it's a provincial requirement.
When do we have to comply with the provincial regs?
Well, It's not like the zoning, like the density requirement, there's not a deadline. The province is asking for the municipalities to align their regulations with the provincial one to avoid confusion. And also because if there's any municipal regulations that are in contradiction with the provincial legislation, then it renders our regulations invalid.
Yeah.
So
the question is, when is the provincial legislation take place?
May 1st.
May 1st, that will be the principal
Okay.
residence requirement that takes effect.
So if we still call something tourist accommodation, if the province doesn't accept that that's a hotel motel, then it's considered residential and has to comply with their regs, right? So us changing our definition of tourist accommodation is not going to change how the province looks at it. So it has no, it won't have any authority. So I think that's basically why we're taking the
Yeah.
tourist accommodation. It's just not a term that the province is using.
But the definition of hotel motel.
It will be defined by the province.
Yes.
We could call it a duck and they could call it a hotel and it will be a hotel.
Councillor Woodward?
So, from what I, like sort of in a nutshell, rather than having individual municipalities sort of having their own rules, the province is just having a blanket rule. Every municipality has to be underneath that and conform, and there's really not a lot, there's no room to move. We're the child of the province, and so we just
I
have
would
to
say
accommodate.
it's not our rules anymore, it's their rules.
That's right.
So there's provincial legislation that says, here's how, if you have a residential, what we deem a residential unit, wherever, here's how we're treating it, and we will fine you, and we will enforce, and we will do this as a province, right, as opposed to us as the municipality saying.
So
here's
we're
our
actually losing some controls here.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
I mean, again, Val, jump in, you're the expert on this, but we cannot regulate less than them, but we can regulate more than them. So I think we have stuff like a cap, which they don't have.
Right,
So
right.
we have a cap and we have different types of business licenses. Really, the big change that the province is bringing is the primary principal residence rule.
Right.
Right, and that's going to affect a number of people that are somewhere between a hotel and a residential property, and those are the people we're hearing from, right? Because they don't quite know where they're landing yet. We don't quite know until we get that definition from them.
That's what I mean.
So,
Until we get the definition.
yeah, but nothing that's being presented tonight. Val is part of a working group, they hear a lot of these concerns, so they're aware of what's happening in Nelson and some of the concerns, and, we're staying on top of it, so as new information comes, we can bring it to council, but at the moment, these are kind of the regs that we think, these are little tweaks that we should do before May 1st.
Councillor Page, then Councillor Tate.
Yeah, I was going to propose to move the recommendation.
Have a second?
Second.
Woodward?
And then just small clarification, we would still have adoption for this bylaw at a future meeting. Okay,
Before April 30th,
sure.
sounds like.
Councillor Tate.
Thanks very much, through the chair. This bylaw change, section 6.1.5, the residential dwelling units part. It's on page 7 of the attachment. So any lot that has been developed as a single detached residential dwelling prior to August 1987 is permitted to be repaired so that it remains a residential building. And any building developed as a single detached residential dwelling prior to 1987 has been converted to a commercial use may revert to an entirely residential use. So this part, I think, is designed to address some of the concerns of the 7 buildings that are stuck between the hotel and the not hotel. Can that wait until we get the hotel definition? Because I'm not sure that we want that a part of the bylaw if it's a response to something that might happen.
can I ask, does that, it doesn't mean they have to, it means they could.
I don't understand any unintended consequences that might come from that.
Am I correct there? So I have this property, it's currently
Yeah, that
commercial,
would
I
be-
could make it a dress shop or whatever, but I can't use it as a residential property unless we make this change. So
That's
this,
right.
to me, gives you more flexibility as that
Yeah,
property owner.
and the properties that I'm thinking of that would benefit from that bylaw amendment, I don't know. I don't think they would qualify as a hotel and motels. I don't want to say for sure, there's no guarantee, but from the initial conversation we had with the province, I don't think these properties would would be eligible to.
So just as like a thought experiment, suppose we had a downtown that had a number of buildings that were originally supposed to be residential that have since become commercial, and they suddenly all revert to residential, then do we have a downtown commercial district? As an example of an unintended consequence.
This doesn't require them to be
No,
residential, does it?
but they have the
could.
option now
They
without,
could.
it would be within the bylaw.
Yeah, and so we thought about that too.
Did you? Okay, good. You're fine.
Yeah,
You're ahead.
the thought behind it is we were thinking that some of these houses, and you, for example, towards the end of Vernon Street and on both ends of Vernon Street, some of these houses have been converted to commercial uses, but usually if you look at the list of permitted uses in C1 and the options that these people have to convert these homes, like they're very restrictive, layouts. And so you have a house that was built, a building that was built as a house, and the C1 uses are very limited anyway. So you would never have a building that is practical to accommodate all of these commercial uses that we usually permit in C1. So we didn't see really that as an issue. It's already pretty restrictive. So why not allowing these houses to be used for residential purposes again, considering also the housing crisis context? I think it is a good option for other properties to have as well, not people who are currently operating short-term rentals.
Okay, so seeing no more questions, we'll vote. All in favor? That carries. And I need 1 second.
Number 2.
Yeah, just scrolling back up. There we go.
Scrolling back.
I'll move that.
Okay, Councilor Woodward, a second. I need a second.
Oh.
Councilor Pinheiro.
That the business license amendment bylaw number 3598, 2024 be introduced and read for a third time by title only.
Any questions or any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, that carries. Number 3. I need to move. Councilor Woodward.
Okay.
Second. Councilor Tate.
Okay. That the zoning amendment bylaw number 3599, 2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Okay, any comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Number 4. Councilor Tate.
That council directs staff to
And
organize a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw 3599/2024. Sorry.
Sorry, you went so fast.
Went so fast.
I did.
Councilor Tate and Councilor Woodward.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Can you say that? Sorry.
That council directs staff to organize a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 3599/2024.
Okay, Councilor Page.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question here because I'm going to want to propose a motion based on the last conversation we had about sending a letter to municipal affairs, and I was just going to flag it now.
Yep.
So when we're done, we'll do that.
Sounds good. All in favor? And that carries. Councilor Page, your motion?
So I'd like the council direct staff to send a letter to request municipal affairs review and consider the providing the City of Nelson with exemption on putting houses within the Heritage Registry as well as the resort municipality status. There are two.
Sorry.
there-
Where is this fitting?
Hold on.
Maybe you can get that two separate resolutions. Kind of two separate.
Okay.
sort of
You want to break it? You want to divide? Okay,
So-
we'll have division.
Okay.
So the resolution would be to send a letter to municipal affairs requesting an exemption for the City of Nelson to protect, to provide us with the opportunity to add new things to the Heritage Register for protection.
You might just want to keep it broader, I think, from what Sebastian said, is that might not give you the protection you want. So I think the concepts around giving authorities to, to protect our heritage, residential heritage
Sure,
properties.
I can accept that wording.
Okay, so the new wording is, let's go over again.
What
Do
do
you
you have
wanna?
so far, Sarah? I think it's instead of
Nothing?
I have like some bits and pieces. No, I don't have.
so I think instead of saying you give us authorities to, for add things to the heritage registry, to authorities to protect our heritage or residential heritage properties.
Okay, so we're writing a letter to the province requesting authority to protect our residential heritage properties.
We're making a motion to vote on whether or not to write a letter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just
That's in,
hitting the points.
That's in regards to the small scale multi.
Yeah,
Okay. Are we all clear? Do we know what?
got it.
Know what we're doing?
I guess Mayor Morrison.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Mayor Morrison.
Do we want to,
Is there
there's a
some-
second part, though.
Yeah, we might need to deal with that
Let's
one first.
deal with the second part first and then,
Oh.
yeah,
Oh,
Natalie?
no, Natalie, hold on.
We're gonna do the second part first, and
So I think
then
the
color.
second part
What's the
is
second one?
short-term rentals.
Yeah,
The second part was the resort, so that's why.
Let's do that first. and
Okay,
then we can
that makes
bring
sense.
Mayor back in.
Okay, so wait a second.
Yeah, we can wait.
Are we moving, are we passing, what are we doing
I
about?
think Mayor Morrison on this one.
So we're
can
gonna,
be
that
part-
would be second?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's.
Got it.
yeah.
just put it on
So let's-
hold.
Okay, I'm just.
No rush.
So we're still sending a letter to municipal affairs to have them consider adding Nelson to the resort municipalities register, list, whatever the list is. And because of course, within this legislation, and has been mentioned many times in the minister, constantly reference that there are additional tools available to resort municipalities, of which Nelson falls outside of that caveat. And I think this is a place where we press our distinctiveness and the appropriate inclusion in that program for the City of Nelson. So I think we request.
The only thing I would say on that is, there's a certain number of designated resort municipalities that share in this pool of money that goes to all those municipalities. So if it's to give us similar authorities around short-term rentals is one thing, to be included in that funding stream is another. If you combine them, you may lose one for the other. So it's up to council. I just want to make sure that you understand if we're asking to be a resort municipality, there's a whole act and regulations and all that sort of thing that's quite different than having authorities to, to manage our short-term rentals the way we feel fit.
So you're simply saying tactfully, if we want to achieve one, go after the low-hanging fruit and the least complicated. That's expect. Okay.
Okay, so we've got a motion.
So my thinking, my process has been, of course, over the course of the couple terms, we've brought this up a few times. And so is this an opportunity to press the province to look for an exemption because the environment has changed, and maybe this is a way we can open ourselves up to that conversation?
Councilor Page, just hold on there for a second, because I'm not clear if we've got the resolution.
Well, the resolution I have is that we send a letter to Municipal Affairs to be added, that the City of Nelson be added to the resort municipality list. That's what there's been no, there's a.
Yeah, we're looking for a mover. As long as we got the resolution, I need a second to get on the floor, and then we'll go back to you.
Sure.
Are you?
I'm sorry, I feel like the resort municipality is a
Hold
very
on.
specific.
I'll second
Councillor
it for
Wood,
discussion.
We just need to get it
Is
on the
that
floor
okay?
first.
There we go.
I'll second
Okay.
for discussion.
As far as I understand, very layman terms, resort municipality is a very particular designation, and it comes with a whole batch of rules and regs and money. We are not that. And so I'm not exactly sure, like, you're kind of saying, can we kind of be part of that, but not really that? And it just seems like, I would imagine the government's like, no, you aren't a resort municipality, so no. So I'm not exactly sure, because you're asking them to basically make Nelson a unique item in all of BC. Because we're not a resort municipality, but you're saying you want benefits from a resort municipality. Is that right?
Councillor Page.
I think it's something we should explore, given the fact that we're so close to a ski hill, and we deal with many of the challenges, if not all of the challenges, of every other resort municipality. It's been brought up at this table before, so it seems like an
aren't
opportunity.
designated that.
No, we are not
We are not
designated
currently.
that currently.
But that is, sorry, just to clarify with the resolution, send a letter to the municipal affairs to be added to the resort municipality list. That is the equivalent of saying to become a resort municipality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With everything included.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let's hold up for a second, because we had an intent to do this kind of separation, and I don't think the resolution captured that we've got on the floor. So what I'd be looking for is an amendment, assuming to get back to the request for the authority to, as we talked about, rather than try to get the full designation of a resort municipality, which is a big ask, we'll start with something smaller. That was, I think, your intent, Councillor Page, and we sort of lost it.
Well, my intent was to put them together. We divided them. We're doing the first, so my recommendation would be to defeat this and move on to the next one and bring Janice in.
Okay.
If people are not comfortable with
Well,
making that request.
we're not sure if that's the case. I'm just trying to get clarity on what the resolution is and if we're capturing the intent and the process here. So,
I think.
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I suggested is I think as it's been characterized, you could either ask to be a resort municipality, then obviously the short-term would be exempt on those short-term regulations, and so you could ask, as Councillor Page has stated in the past, this council and previous councils have gone to the minister a number of times saying we believe we should be a short-term era resort municipality. We clearly, we're touted across the province as one of those tourism places, and we think your current criteria doesn't reflect our community. So that's asking for what we've asked for a long time. The consequence of that is that would give us the authorities around how we manage short-term rentals. So that's one avenue to go, or you could narrow it and say, actually what we're most concerned at this time is that we don't have authorities to, those authorities similar to other, tourism towns, let's not call them resort municipalities, but other tourism towns to manage our short-term rentals in the way we feel is appropriate for our community. So we would like to have those, have a similar exemption as a resort municipality, reflecting the fact that we're a strong tourism community or something to that effect. So I think there's two options. One, go for the whole thing on the resort municipality, or two, say, no, we want more authorities around our tourist accommodation because we're a tourism community.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to go to Councillor Page as the mover so that we can get clarification on what you were hoping to get out of that resolution.
Kevin captures it.
Okay.
Right? So it's basically prescriptive versus performative. Do we want to be this exact thing, or do we want to have the features of this thing? So I like, frankly, either one, if we can frame the letter in either way. So if we want to amend it, to go more of a performance path of, we would like to have the characteristics of a resort community, and then see if we can negotiate with community about that. If they're open to it, I think there might be some opening to it.
Okay, so I'm feeling this is not, doesn't need to be amended. We can, because we didn't get clarity in the first place on the original resolution, we can make this the resolution. I think we feel good about that because that was, we're trying to craft it in the
Yep.
process. So we will call that the resolution on the floor. If that's,
Okay, so we're okay with what Kevin suggested, which is to be, not to be prescriptive.
not to be a resort municipality, but
Not to be- but to
to
have
the tourist designation to have the authorities of a resort municipality regulating
Heritage and
heritage
short-term rental.
and short-term rentals. Okay.
Okay.
Is that clear as mud? Yes. And we've got Councillor Pinheiro and Councillor Tate. No, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Pinheiro. Right, Page and Payne. No, in terms of the movers and the seconders.
yeah.
I'm just helping
That's
Sarah
I
out.
second it, yeah.
Page and Payne on the mover and seconder. And we're going to Pinheiro for comment.
So I may have missed something because I haven't been here that long, and so this has come to council many times before apparently, but I don't recall it. Perhaps I'm missing something on the great benefits of being a resort community. I personally have no interest in living in a resort community. I have real interest in living in a community. I don't see how exempting our short-term rentals from any constraints at all is going to help the housing crisis for the people that live and work here. I think I'm quite fine with having to have a principal residence and a short-term rental, and I think that that's totally reasonable, and I have zero interest in living in Whistler. So if that is what the letter is about, then I don't want any part of it.
Okay,
Thank
Councillor Woodward.
I'm feeling very uncertain about this. I feel like this is a huge conversation that we're trying to like shoehorn in at the last bit here. So I'm going to vote no, because I think that this is much larger issue, and I feel very uncomfortable with what's happening here. So I'm going to vote no on that.
Okay, anyone else?
So this is about sending a letter.
This is about sending the
Okay,
letter.
I think I can go that far.
You're okay. Well then,
Point of sending a letter for you.
Well, I think one of the key things is to have a better understanding of what a resort municipality is. And we won't change who we are by getting a designation, other than what I understand to be some fairly significant monetary benefits that allow us to do more for affordable housing. So it's one thing that the Housing Committee has looked at, is the benefits of being a resort municipality. Doesn't change who we are. Doesn't make us Whistler or Fernie or any of the other resort municipalities. So I think that's one of the parts of it. But sending a letter to explore that, and something that has been discussed, I would presume not just in the last council, but in previous councils at different times, because does who we are, our personality, make us different just because we have a different designation? We put the welcome over the Nelson sign below instead of above. I mean, it's, I don't think it's maybe not that insignificant, but I think it's something that is worth exploring. So if we can get a letter and get some attention because it is a different environment, we don't have to say yes. We just have explored a possibility that may bring benefits that we don't have time to fully explore right now. I do think it's worth going down that road because I'm open to the potential.
great. Oh, Councillor Pinheiro.
Just another thought, and I mean, that may be the case, I'm not sure. Just seems silly to me to lose all of our housing to short-term rentals and then hopefully get some sort of money to replace it when we already had it to begin with, or potentially could have it to begin with. I mean, there's, anecdotally speaking, I mean, I've lived here for 30 years or something, and roughly the population is the same. And roughly there's the same amount of houses, and yet there's none. And anecdotally speaking, that's because of short-term rentals. If there's many factors, but that's a major factor. And so to say that we don't want restrictions on short-term rentals, or we want an exemption to the restrictions on short-term rentals, and then hope that somehow it's going to be made up by some sort of potential funding in the future, or to say that becoming a resort municipality won't change who we are. I think it fundamentally does change who we are, and change is gradual and incremental, and, you know, Nelson's far different than it was 30 years ago, and it happened slowly and gradually without everybody really noticing. And I think that there's moments to sort of take a stand for what you want, and be clear about things, about, you know, if we are a community that is special in some way, I think we need to, there's moments to put your foot down, and yeah, I guess that's it. I'm done.
Councillor Page?
So just as a final comment, because we can move on with the rest of the business, I would put my foot down and just let Councillor Panero know he's a bit mistaken, because the resort municipality legislation allows the cities that are in that designation to have additional powers, not less, to deal resources, as Councillor Payne pointed out, to deal with the crisis that goes on with being attractive like a resort municipality. It includes being able to have additional restrictions. It's not, I think I'm hearing this conclusion that we would be exempting SRTs. That is not what the ask is about. It gives us additional powers to take that control. Whether you're Fernie, whether you're Kimberly, whether you're Whistler, you have additional funds coming to help support affordable housing. So those are the kinds of things we would ask for, and it's been referenced multiple times by the housing minister that the resort municipalities don't need to be swept with the same kind of rules, because they have additional powers given from that legislation. So the letter is really just understanding that the environment has changed, that the province is going out to say to the municipalities that, hey, we're putting these rules in place, but you resort municipalities were not necessarily doing that because you already have those tools. And because there's these other co-benefits that come from it, I think it is an important opportunity right now to have the conversation and say, hey, what about now? It doesn't change who we are necessarily, and as we've already wordsmithed at the table, we're not actually asking to be a resort municipality, but instead to have those powers provided to us as an exemption from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. And I think that would be a conversation that Minister Kang would be open to having. So I think it's not the conclusion that we are saying yes to everything SRT. We are basically saying there are some unique situations between us versus Castlegar or any other city such as Cranbrook. We're a little bit different because we have this huge ski hill, a very popular destination, and it drives a different kind of behavior in this town, and we need additional tools to manage it. But I appreciate that there might be other ideas around the table, and it is, a new thought. So maybe people need to percolate with it for a while.
Yeah, we'll give it a try. Try as in a vote.
Call a vote.
All in favor? And opposed? Okay, so that fails. And get the mayor back.
Is that for you? You did great.
Are we moving on to 13A now?
We have another letter. A resolution.
No, we ended up. Yeah, we ended up putting them together.
Okay.
They're two separate things.
I thought they were
two separate things. The heritage one is separate.
Oh, I felt comfortable with them.
I have it.
Fine.
Okay. Can you read it?
This must be you.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
Do I need to leave again?
No. I think we can manage this one.
One was short-term, one was so you should
Oh, there. Oh, okay, you put something else in there, okay.
We did.
That's fine. You just snuck it in somewhere, Heritage.
You left the room.
Okay.
So we did have the one letter which we're just working on, or sorry, the one resolution that was proposed that we're just working on the wording because it got erased here. So I have some rough notes, so please do jump in and help. But that council directs staff to send a letter to Minister of Municipal Affairs to request authorities to protect heritage, residential heritage properties. Yeah.
That's fine. So it's been moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. Any discussion? Councillor Woodward.
How do we define heritage?
We have an entire.
Is there is it our definition or is it like a provincial definition?
I think that's, you want to open this dialogue with the province, and I think what would be likely asking for is to allow a local government, which is the city of Nelson, to define that. They probably will want some containment of that.
Okay.
Councillor Lockenberg.
And for clarity, I think Nelson does have a heritage list.
Yes.
And I'm assuming we just work from that.
Right, but the province might have a very different idea of what that is.
Yeah, but it begins the it moves here the context for the conversation.
Okay.
Like this is our list.
So just because I'm late to the party of a discussion that I could have been in because I don't own a heritage listed property, I thought we decided earlier in the meeting that we were going to have a workshop around heritage so we could define what we were sort of doing, but now we're writing a letter already to the government. Councillor Page.
Just by the way of filling you in, we came up because of the exemption on the resort municipalities that the proposal was to send a letter about the resort municipalities, including the heritage values, and then that got divided. And so now we're back to this. So it wasn't the intent to short circuit the workshop conversation. It's just in that conversation about asking for an exemption to resort municipalities and to get some of those powers along with the heritage values that we ended up at 2 motions.
So you certainly could table this until you have the workshop and do this at that time.
It would make some sense that we have a better understanding of what we're asking for, because is heritage last week's haircut or is heritage, 100 years ago? I just, guidance, that's all I mean, I'm sorry I wasn't part of the discussion, but I think that having the workshop might let us know what we're asking for better, because they will, if it doesn't make any sense to them, they'll just ignore it, or they'll come back with a whole bunch of questions that we still might not be able to answer, so. Anyways, there is this motion on the table,
Well, do you want
we
to
can vote it, we
move to
can.
table it to the workshop?
So after the work, so I mean, if we're gonna table, if you decide to table it, we need to have a date when we bring it back.
After the workshop.
We can say that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so
do we have to have a motion to table
Yes.
this motion?
Yes.
We didn't vote on the motion, though.
No, so let's vote to table it, and then it just hangs, basically. Then when we bring it back after the workshop.
Okay.
Okay?
Everybody clear on that? Mover and seconder are okay with that? Okay, so move and second to table, sending letter to the ministry until after our workshop regarding heritage and designation. Okay, any further discussion? Oh, you
Move
did,
to
the same
table.
ones moved and seconded.
Oh, they did,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry. And we have a third one, we have a spare just in case.
Lottenberg and Page.
Yeah, sorry. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay, so whatever that was, 12C. Moving on then to item number 13. So we have a few recommendations from staff that have come forward this evening. 13A, rezoning application for 655 Highway 3A. Summary is that the Villa Motel situated at 655 Highway 3A has applied to amend the official community plan bylaw and the zoning bylaw to permit the establishment of a recreational vehicle campground as a site-specific use in the C2 service commercial zone in addition to the current motel use. Council is being requested to deny the application. There's a background piece there, and we have Natalie from our senior planner from the city here to, did you want to give a brief overview to start with or just answer questions? Brief overview?
Yeah.
Sure, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so, yes, the Villa Motel located on the North Shore neighborhood across from the Orange Bridge has applied to rezone the property to allow 7 RV-only campsites in addition to the motel use. You can see up there on the image the slots for the new RV campsites, kind of highlighted there with the orange arrows. The villa, so the property is currently zoned C2 service commercial. The site operates as a motel under the tourist accommodation. You got a big overview of what those terms mean today. With 6 long-term residential units also located on the property. In 2019, there was a fire that resulted in the loss of one of the buildings on the site, and you can kind of see that building up on that picture there. You can kind of see your mic. Oh, sorry.
So instead of rebuilding that structure that was damaged in the fire, the applicant is now proposing 7 RV-only campsites, which does require a rezoning application. So in terms of the proposed changes for the site, the applicant is planning on leveling the site to allow for RV camping. The pink area in the screen would be the required fill. To hold back the fill, we'd need to install retaining wall along the pink area. And they're also planning on adding vegetation and some greenery, some vines for beautification and to sort of soften the retaining wall. They're also planning on removing the large mature vegetation that's currently on the property, and that will allow them to create the campsites. So in terms of our analysis, we have worked with the applicant over the last several months. However, we still have some concerns with the project. One of the concerns, and I think this is one of our major concerns with the project, is that it is the entrance to the city, and it may detract from the visual appeal of the neighborhood. It's going to have a large retaining wall, and you're going to have RV campsites very close to the highway on that sort of corner piece. We've also noted some feasibility concerns with the proposed design. The site is narrow, given the existing motel use and the parking on site. We also have noted concerns with maneuvering the vehicles on there, may be problematic for some types of RVs. The drive-through stalls that they've proposed, the exit out of those stalls are onto steep grades. And there could require several turning movements on Gagne Road to be able to enter the property if you're coming off the bridge. I will note that we actually don't have expertise in-house to review the engineering plans, but these are comments that have come up through the review process and through the open house. Other concerns is that, we are a bit worried about the potential conversion of RV campers into more permanent housing. Obviously, there is high demand for housing and low supply, so, that is a concern. I have talked to bylaw enforcement, and they just don't have the resources to ensure ongoing compliance at this site. And if people were able to stay longer than they were permitted, longer than 90 days, occupants could be protected under the BC tenancy rights. So that is a bit of a concern in terms of enforcement. And then we'll just note that, RV camping in general may be appropriate outside the city instead of inside the city. So in terms of communication, the applicant did host an open house as required by the bylaw. Neighbors were distributed to everybody within 60 meters of the property. Concerns noted at the open house were conversion to long-term housing, potential, odor issues from the hookups that would be on site. They noted feasibility concerns as some residents do, maneuver trailers, as well as safety concerns. The details of the summary of that report is attached in the council report. We have not done an official referral to everybody from the city. That would happen before the public hearing, but we have received a number of letters which are attached to the report. 3 of those letters are within 60 meters of this Villa Motel. 2 were opposed to the rezoning and 1 was in support. We've also received 8 additional letters, 4 of those within city limits and 4 from outside city limits. And the application was referred to Advisory Planning Commission. They actually recommended in favor of the application. The details, the summary of those notes are included in the report as well. Staff are recommending that council deny this application based on the analysis that we've provided.
Councilors, questions? Councilor Pinero.
So just a clarification on there, it seems like a couple times mentioned that a concern would be that it would be long-term housing, or why is that a concern? I thought that's what we wanted.
We do want long-term housing, but we want it to be adequate long-term housing. RV campers are generally not suitable for winter conditions, and so our bylaw prohibits them being used as long-term housing. I think the province also does not support using them as long-term housing.
I see, so just like people overstaying there, and then that would be but presumably this is the Villa Hotels, it's an extension of the Villa Hotel, so that would be sort of the same as somebody squatting in their room, essentially, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think what we're worried about is that people would end up living in those trailers longer than would be permitted by the bylaw, and that is not appropriate long-term housing. The applicant has let me know that that's not how they run their motel. They have policies in place to make sure that wouldn't happen. That's not their intent. I'm just noting that if that were to happen, because there is such a high demand for housing and a low supply, we may have some problems with enforcement.
Sorry, one more.
Yes.
Is enforcement up to us, or is it a private property, so the Villa Hotel enforces that? Do they not?
We would have some rules in this bylaw if this was for camping, that it would be limited, just like we have for short-term rentals. And if people aren't complying with our regulations, bylaw enforcement could be sent to them and they could be ticketed. It would get complicated if, they were protected under the BC Tenancy Act. And again, like RVs really are not generally appropriate for long-term housing in the winter. They're not really conditioned for that, So if it was suitable long-term housing, then that would be fine. Housing is actually allowed in the C2 zone, but it's got to be appropriate housing.
Councilor Payne.
So the APC did recommend?
Yes. They recommended, they were in support. I believe it was 3 in support, 1 in opposition. They noted that they thought there was a demand for RV camping and that they thought this was a good location for it. So I think, and then we talked a little bit about traffic. The applicant had provided a traffic impact assessment and it basically said, this isn't going to create any more traffic than the previous building did, so it's a bit of a non-issue, and the APC wanted to support it.
Councilor Payne.
I would like to see more information about how these individuals who stayed there, even if they stayed long-term, would be protected under the Residential Tenancy Act, because that is not my understanding at all. So I would just like to have more information around that before we considered that as a viable concern in denying this application.
Can I just ask, Natalie, did we get a legal opinion, or?
I didn't get a legal opinion. I've done some research. It is kind of complicated. We probably would need a legal opinion to know for sure. I just noted it as a potential concern, and I sent a few things to Woody, and we have had a discussion about it, and there's some articles written about it, but I think ultimately we'd need a lawyer to tell us for sure. And I did talk to Bylaw about it, and they are dealing with some of those issues currently, and they are challenging similar-ish situations, so. But yeah, if council would like
in RV parks within the city. So where's the other RV park other than the campground within the city that we're?
There's no other.
Oh, okay, so
you're
I'm
probably
sorry, I
talking about
misunderstand then.
People living in RVs on private
Just
property.
in private property. Okay, thank you.
On parks
Sorry.
and pullaways.
Pardon me?
In parks and pullaways, like if you go anywhere down into the Lower Mainland and pull into a rest stop, you have protected RV camping and living situations all along the highway. And the province had provided guidelines in 2020 that made clear that they do, after a set period of time, start to receive benefits and protections from the Rent Tenancy Act. That is a thing.
Does it say what the period of time is?
It's a thing
Sorry,
now.
okay.
Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Tate and then Councillor Lockenberg.
Can you help me understand the drawing a little bit more with the apartment building? So that was damaged. It's kind of like the big block in the middle, and on the schematic, that's like a 3D schematic. It's the big block in the middle.
Sorry.
Is that the apartment building, the biggest, tallest one in the middle?
This one here?
Yes.
I believe that is the apartment building.
And it's no longer housing?
There is still housing in that building, and then you can't see it on this rendering, so they've removed that building.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's actually removed.
The building was
Yep.
right in this location.
Okay.
Is my understanding.
Yeah.
This is difficult rendering, but it's on the looker's left of the property there.
Okay.
But I think you can see it.
Yeah, Amanda's is in front.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's,
Oh, sorry.
so if you go back to that other one actually, Natalie,
This way?
this one, so this is the one that you see currently,
Mm-hmm.
right? That one's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's actually right here,
Okay.
where the other location is.
And
that
so,
got burned.
yes, and has been demolished. It said in the report, has been demolished. And I thought I read in the report that the one purpose was to kind of replace that. Did I misread it?
You know, they don't have plans to rebuild that structure. You know, I think instead they wanted to pivot to the RV
That's what I mean,
camping.
that the RV
Yeah.
camping would be instead of replace it.
Yeah, it's going to kind of take over that previous area.
And more.
Yes.
Yeah, and do I understand the drawings correctly that the retaining wall is basically 8 feet high from the road?
I can't quite remember the exact height, but it will be a high retaining wall. I think we do limit it to a maximum of 3 meters in commercial zone, so it could be up to
I thought
10
I
feet
saw
high, yeah.
somewhere here on the
And I think it is
page
staggered.
18, 2.47 meters, and that's from partway up.
Yeah.
So from road height, it would look a lot higher than that.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Mural Fest.
Councillor Lockenberg and then Councillor Payne.
Having read through the comments from the other, from the neighbors, having looked at the APC's response, and then of course looking at staff's, it seems very much that this is pretty divided opinions across the board. And I think that some of the concerns that I had, in general, I just want to say, by default, I would normally go with the staff recommendation. You know, staff has put the time and the thought into this. So when I'm kind of on the fence, then I default to staff, and I'm leaning that way in this case. However, when the APC weighs in, that's also pretty compelling because we've, recruited these people and to do this difficult work and really make this their contribution to the city. So I really want to give an offer, an acknowledgement of the work that the APC has put in to this and and acknowledge their considerations. My concerns, I think, primarily do come down to a comment that I read in the staff or in the accompanying documentation about that it's very likely that the majority of the the RVs would be from contractors and workers who are coming into the city as opposed to tourists. And I think that's a pretty important distinction, that it does start to become, long-term rental and would have definitely a different character than if it was a tourist accommodation. And so given that fact that I was very on the fence and staff made a fairly compelling argument in favor, and that issue in particular, I think I'm going to go along with the staff recommendation and vote to deny.
Councillor, huh? No, we haven't, we're just nobody's put anything on the table yet. Councillor Payne?
I just want to clarify, my memory of hearing the report regarding our campground is that we are at high occupancy all for the entire season that we're open. So I think we have a need for additional units. What Councillor Lochtenberg just said made me think it's even more attractive because we know we do have contractor employees coming into the city who need a place to stay. So whether we would consider them long-term tenants or just ancillary workers that we know we can't house in other places, that's what makes it attractive to me. We have a perceived need. The idea that as you're driving into Nelson, there's a higher wall, I just think mural fest. It doesn't, it's not off-putting to me to see an RV park. It's just part of our tourist industry that we're strong in. So I don't see really clearly a reason to deny it. So I'm still open to other thoughts.
Councillors? Any further thoughts? Does anybody want to move a motion?
You could move the existing motion, and if you defeat it, then we'll have to kind of bring something else back, probably is the cleanest. I don't know if we're in a position to approve a rezone at this stage.
So
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendation that council denied the application.
And do we have a seconder? Councillor Page. So do you want to read that, Councillor Lochtenberg?
That council deny the application to amend the zoning bylaw and official community plan to allow recreational vehicle campground as a site-specific use at 655 Highway 3A.
Great, so that's been moved and seconded, and I see some hands coming up now.
Yeah.
Councillor Tate.
So I have a question. So this is to deny the application, but my question is, I don't totally understand. It would be adding that use to that zone or to that site only? Help me understand it a bit more clearly.
Yes, if council wants to move forward with rezoning this property, then I would bring forward bylaw amendments. In that bylaw amendment, it would amend the zoning bylaw and would say just at this property, you could have an RV only campground. And we have examples of just like one-off amendments through other zones. So that is kind of consistent how we do it. And I debated which way to go, but I think this is probably the easiest for the applicant, but wouldn't allow campsites throughout the city. Obviously, that probably wouldn't make sense. Does that?
Sorry, can I follow up with that?
Sure can.
Is it similar to when the government road building came forward and added tourist accommodation to that specific parcel, for lack of a better word?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm understanding the process. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think it, also allows staff to negotiate with the proposed developer. How do you beautify that wall? Right now, sounds to me they're proposing some landscaping, but you could have them required to have a mural on that wall or something like that. So it gives us a chance to sort of deal with some of these concerns we have.
So go ahead. I had another question.
Oh, no, sorry.
Is that a follow-up to your previous question?
Yeah.
A little bit, because so I have a curiosity about, like, say, for example, there are buildings on that property. Does this type of amendment make it so that you could knock down all the buildings and make it all RV? I'm always thinking about like, or what if? I'm just curious.
Yes, the amendment could allow that.
Okay.
I think, and I didn't bring forward the bylaws, I just wanted to understand if council did want to move forward with this application, the way it was written, and I did some best practice review to come up with it. It was mostly regional districts that I ended up looking at. They just kind of said, some rules that the RVs needed to be movable, they couldn't be permanently there, and that you needed so much space per camp spot. But in theory, yes, the buildings could be demolished. As I understand it, that is not the applicant's plan. They want to run the two businesses, or I guess it would be treated as one, but they want to have the two different, the campsite and the motel use for generations. They want to pass it down.
And Natalie, I assume we could change the zoning to restrict the number of RV units on that site?
We could.
Right.
Yep, we could, if that was what council wanted. Yep, no problem.
And I'm sorry, I'm just processing. The new STR is 90 days or less, and I think that this business is also 90 days or less. Is that the same? Like, I had a curiosity about how they align or don't align. Because if there's a concern of going temporary, semi-long-term housing in these spaces, I feel like there's a 90-day caveat there. Let me just keep thinking about my question.
I think beyond 90 days, it does become long-term. I think that is the.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't feel like campsites, people bring their own RVs. I don't think that's going to fall under the new provincial regulations. I don't think they're going to be restricting those. But I think once you stay there for longer than 90 days, it's the long-term housing. And then you could potentially have other issues that I've mentioned. The applicant doesn't plan to do that, but it's just a note.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Payne?
Just a small distinction. I'm going back to the neighborhood concern of the odors. So are these fully serviced with sewage and?
Yeah, they're going to have full serviced hookups, so water, sanitary power. They're not going to have a public, sani station. I don't anticipate that odor would be a big concern, but it was noted from the adjacent property owner that he was worried about that. It may be more of an issue with a public sani station, but again, it's only a few campsites, so I don't see that.
I was just trying to connect what the odor would be coming from. But.
It's from, I think it's from the sanitary hookups.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Lockenberg?
Sorry, on that, just so you saying that there's not going to be a hookup? These because there must be. Like, I can see it not being a separate sani dump, but there would be some sort of sani connection.
Sorry if I misspoke. Yes.
Yeah.
So every site will be able to be fully hooked up. And then, but at the city campground, there's a public sanitary dump that anybody can go and dump their sewage in.
Yeah.
They're not interested in having one of those available at the property. It would only be available to people using those campsites, and then they would hook up fully.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And just for reference, that's where the odors come from, because it is essentially a pipe that just goes down into.
Can be smelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, the public sani is where the odors.
No. So every site is
yeah.
serviced. It's basically got a hole in the ground that when your tank is full, you plug your hose into, or you leave your hose plugged into, and it dumps down there. And that's when that cap gets lifted off. That's when you'll get the odors wafting about. So it is.
It is a.
But it's per site, as opposed to you would have a higher usage of a sani dump where anybody driving into town can pull in and dump there and then just pull away without staying. And then you would have that sort of more frequent usage.
Right. And thank you for that clarification, because I did have an RV at one point, and I did find the smell was a factor at times. It was, sometimes it wasn't, sometimes it was. But in this case, what we're doing is offering kind of an open-ended, so it might be good for a while, but then a new owner could come and who knows if they would maintain it. But it was a factor in the RV that we had. Often there would be pretty intense smells, and then sometimes not at all. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I mean, not to get into it, but I think the hookup, I think alleviates that. I think it's when it's sitting in your tank.
Yeah.
Right. So it goes directly in.
For a while, and then.
Yeah.
Right.
Alan,
Thank you
just
for that.
Clarification, this isn't going into our sanitary.
It
or
is.
it?
It is.
That's what
Yes,
it
it
So
is.
it's not sitting on, it's not sitting in a tank that's
No.
being pumped. It's going right into our sanitary, and our
Yep.
public utilities folks are okay with that. I know we've had concerns in the past of
I didn't receive
un-
any concerned comments.
uncontrollable stuff going into our sanitary from.
Yeah, I didn't note any concerns from staff when we referred it. Again, there was a building there, but previously, so I think in terms of usage, but yeah, I don't know about controlling what goes
Yeah,
down them.
Probably no different than anybody else than in a motel or whatever could be putting the same things down the toilets.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. So I'm trying to imagine this in operation in my head. And I'm thinking about, so you're gonna have RVs coming and going at all different times, because people are coming and going at all different times. You're gonna have the traffic for the actual Villa Hotel coming and going. So lots of movement of vehicles and traffic out of this site. Plus the restaurant, people coming and going. So it's as a full site, it's gonna be a lot of stuff moving around, a lot of traffic, a lot of fumes, a lot of noise. And I think the other thing too here is this incredibly tight turn. RVs are massive nowadays. So that, sorry.
Sorry, my fault.
Can't
help it, I was trained.
I know, but it's not.
Thanks,
this is
maybe
not-
it's really important it's a business meeting,
It's
so,
okay.
Sorry.
because it's a distraction to those of us that are
We're trying to put together
trying
thoughts.
to debate and come to a
Thank
resolution.
You, I stand corrected.
So yeah, the turn here looks incredibly tight, and then you're actually, if things go awry there, you're impeding people getting onto Johnson Road, or they're accessing their houses. So for me, it feels like an incredibly busy situation in a very tight spot right on the end of the bridge, which, as we know, that is an incredibly busy place with locals, tourism, and logging, and trucks and everything moving by there. So it just feels like, this is just going to add like quite a knot of busyness and fumes and noise and people. So I feel like it's packing a lot into a very tight spot, and it is also the entrance to our city. So anyways, that's just, as I'm listening to all the discussion, I'm just kind of thinking about a daily operation of that place in this configuration.
Councillor Lochinver.
So that raises a couple other questions for me. In the Penco engineering report, there's quite a bit of it appears to comply with regulations. It might. So is this the best analysis of the impacts on the highway and the turning? Because according to Penco, it seems to be quite a bit of uncertainty. It's generally believes it's going to be okay, but then there's this, there's probably three spots I found that it was like, it may appear to comply with regulations. It does potentially require some improved safety, the improved signage will be needed. Sorry, for example, changes to signage as proposed. So would that be highways would have to do that?
Yeah.
Excuse me, that signage?
The Ministry of Transportation has reviewed this, and they said they are okay, and they have recommended signage changes. So yeah, it was sent to them. I was concerned as well about entering and exiting off the highway, but it was reviewed by them. I kind of see on some of the documents that I provided council, you can see a number of turning movements on Gagne Road. You know, that could be a slight inconvenience to some of the residents there. Again, we're not in support of it, but you know, there is only 7 RV stalls, so I don't know how often they'll be coming in and out of here, and obviously like selecting the right time will be important, but yeah, I can see those points too.
Councillor Pinero.
Yeah, just reading the applicant did sort of address a lot of these concerns, and I'm not sure, you know, realistically, I guess we won't know until it happens, but I think at least it shows some sort of awareness of it, you know, and an ability to deal with it pragmatically. And they did point out that at the moment, as a hotel or a motel, there's tour buses coming in there and sports teams coming in there, and they all drive gigantic things that are as big or bigger than an RV at the moment, and it seems to work. What I just keep coming up with is like, this is, to me, just sort of an extension of a hotel. It's maybe like a different incarnation of a hotel room, essentially. And so, given it seems from all the letters, most of the letters that were sent, it seems like these people have been running a very, you know, a fairly tight ship as far as a motel goes in their current situation. I'm just not prejudiced to think that they would somehow fall apart completely just because it's RVs on instead of rooms. It seems like their intent is just to basically run an extension of their hotel, not a long-term, you know, camper village or something of that nature. And so, being private property and a business, you'd think that they would. It just seems a bit odd that we are. Or maybe is there a reason why we're so hesitant to, or like, do we see something changing, like that apart from what they've been doing? Like, is there something extra that I'm not seeing?
No, you know what, I think that we're hesitant about this because it is the entrance to the city, and I'm worried about like the visual aspects of it. The long-term housing, you know, came up from the open house discussions, from some of the comments with the neighbors. I'm just kind of noting at a high level, I don't believe this applicant intends to do that, but there are pressures on housing. So it has happened in other communities, and that's why I was talking about like it could potentially be complicated. BC tenancy rights, if they were in place, would supersede our zoning. So you'd have to kind of deal with those. So I just wanted council to be aware of that, but I think the primary issue is aesthetics and the entrance to the city, and not necessarily how they run their operations.
I see.
Yeah.
Councillors, any further thoughts? There is a motion on the floor that council deny the application to amend the zoning bylaw and official community plan to allow recreational vehicle campground as a site-specific use at 655 Highway 3A. Are we ready for the vote, council? Seeing no other speakers, Councillor Lockenberg? Okay. I heard a Okay. All those in favor of the resolution as stated? Council, deny the application to amend, so in favor of what's on the table. That council deny the application to amend the zoning bylaw and official community plan to allow recreational vehicle campgrounds as a site-specific use at 655 Highway 3A. Before we vote, I just need to have some clarity around, if we vote to this motion, it's done. If we vote against this, it doesn't mean that it's a go yet. I don't, like, because there still has to be then, a bylaw has to be written, there has to be all the readings, there has to be public meetings. It comes back again, council has the opportunity to then still vote against having it.
Yes, correct. It's just, we wanted to know if council did want to move forward with bylaw amendments. I could, if council did, I could come back in April with bylaw amendments. And if council still wanted to move forward, then we could schedule a public hearing. That's when the notification, the neighborhood could come and speak in support or opposition. And up until, after the public hearing, council could still approve or deny the application.
Okay, Councillor Tate, question.
Thank you. I'd be interested to know for, I sense a hesitation in the room, and it's just, I'm not entirely sure if we can pinpoint it, like you're saying. And I was curious whether council had any requests for more information, whether it had to do with the landscaping views, streetscapes, odors, any kind of additional research that would make this vote sit more comfortably. And we can still, but then that way it would be prepared, that extra information would be prepared when and if the bylaw came forward. Does that make sense? Is there any simmering questions that you're like, well, wait a sec, I was curious, can you find out about odor? How much is there an odor measurement?
So then you're, so that's fine. But then what we're doing is that then we're either gonna refer this, and then the same thing is gonna come back to us, or voting no and it ends, or you're voting against this current motion. I know that now I'm all talking and then the double negatives.
Yeah.
You're gonna vote against this motion.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna go through all of that, where you're gonna have, within the bylaw development, the opportunity to ask all those questions. We don't ask those questions now, then decide, oh no, we're gonna deny it, and so deny, the questions aren't gonna get answered.
I meant to have the questions available to staff so that it's prepared at the bylaw stage,
Right,
rather than asking those questions at that point.
But you do have the opportunity
While we do
to
this
do that.
Okay. Oh,
While you do
Yeah.
while you do the work,
Okay, sounds good.
you always have that
Yeah.
opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah, if you do have other questions or
Yeah.
ideas, make sure you pass them on to Natalie, and
Yeah.
she'll do that as part of that research.
Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I think part of the hesitation is it's just not it doesn't feel clear cut. I mean, there are many pros and cons. And I think, as staff has said, it is the entrance to the city. So it's a pretty prominent piece of property. This Welcome Nelson sign is right in front of it. So I feel like there's probably a lot of hesitation just around, what's the best mix to have there? What is it that would look good and work well at the entrance to the city? But I'm very much I feel very unsure myself, but I feel like maybe we need to go down the road a bit more, mind the pun, to sort of see some of these questions that you're asking, to kind of flush that out a bit more, because it does feel quite sparse in some ways for such a big project at the entrance to the city.
I think we're hearing a clear, council wants to make sure this is done appropriately as a gateway to our community, and I think that's good marching orders to our staff and the developer of how do we do this in a way that actually maybe enhances our entrance to our community as opposed to detracts from it, and I think that's what I'm hearing around the table, so we certainly will do that.
So what you would be looking at potentially here is that there is that whole section called options and alternatives, and option number 2, it's at the, that is the next step in the, or 3, it's just you can go back and ask, and we can come back with the same thing, or we can go back and come back with a bylaw and still say no. There's still an opportunity here to say no, if that's a concern for anybody. You can either say no now, or you can say no later after more information comes, if that's the concern. I see staff at the back. I'm wondering if they wanted to make a comment.
I think he's just standing.
Oh, back pain, sorry, it's the going concern here, sorry. Councillor Lockenberg.
As the mover of the motion, this conversation has helped evolve my thinking somewhat, at least to the point where I'm be willing to vote no, and so I think that might get the majority then, if that helps move this along.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the table. We either have to defeat it or move along. Councillor Pate.
I thought we called it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm feeling comfortable with letting this move to the stage of a more formal process for consideration. Picking up on Councillor Tate's comment about things that would be important in that consideration, it strikes me the access to the amenities, the waterfront, over the Orange Bridge, people camping there, kids wanting to go across the highway to get to the lake because it's right there. What does that look like? Is there pedestrian components we need to be talking to Modi about outside of this site? Because I appreciate all the comments. We get a bit out of band for me when we're talking about the operation of someone else's business. It really is just down to the land use. What is an appropriate land use? How will people be coming and going from this property at the end of the day? And I'm thinking, what does that look like when your RV pulls in with your kids and they want to run to the lake because it's right across the street? How do we protect? How do we signage for that? Can we do anything about that? What about when they grab bikes and they want to go cross Bob? Is there any improvements we can do there? It's how they're going to access the amenities and what that RV park might look like that is different than the villa currently looks like. So those would be the kinds of things I would want to look for in a more formal process. Otherwise, I think we're hearing enough hesitation to evaluate this, from my perspective, in a more formal way.
Okay, so once again, councillors, we have a motion on the table that council deny the application to amend the zoning bylaw and official community plan to allow recreational vehicle campground as a site-specific use at 655 Highway 3A. All those in favor of the motion to deny? Seeing nobody. All those against the motion to deny? Okay, and that carries, so thank you. That motion fails, and I believe that we have at this point given council enough, staff enough direction that to go ahead with the next steps. And I think you've gotten a lot of feedback, and Councillor Lockenberg would like to add to that.
Mayor, so clarification then, do we not need to then pass? No, you're good. This will come back.
The applicant has the right to bring forward an application, a rezoning application.
Okay.
I see.
Great.
All we're doing in this case is, if we didn't want to go through all that work, if there was no appetite for this. But the applicant has the right to bring this forward.
Sorry, it's very distracting to have the audience conversing while we're trying to have a business meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we know where we are. So thank you very much. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for taking us through this. Thank you, Council, for your questions, and we'll see what comes to us next. Okay, the next item on that, now I've lost my agenda. The next item is 13B, the 2024 UBCM EOC Equipment and Training Grant. The city's emergency management team is applying for a UBCM grant to fund further support the development of the city's emergency operations center through personal training and the purchase of installation of additional equipment. The goal being to increase the overall capacity of the EOC to better support emergency response situations. The proposed enhancements will allow the City of Nelson to not only respond more effectively to emergencies, but position itself to provide better support to neighboring communities and jurisdictions. The grant funding request is for a total of $30,000, and the city would contribute an additional $10,850 in in-kind contributions. The total cost of the project is estimated at $40,850 plus PST. As part of the grant application process, a council resolution supporting the UBCM grant application and overall grant management is required. Do I have a mover?
Move.
Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. Councillor Woodward, if you don't mind.
Whereas council supports Emergency Operations Center enhancement through emergency management principles, therefore be it resolved that the Corporation of the City of Nelson be authorized to apply for $30,000 in grant funding under the UBCM Emergency Operations Center Equipment and Training 2024 Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, and further the City of Nelson staff be responsible for the oversight of the grant management.
So, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, Councillor. Item number 13C, the electric tramway track upgrade contribution. As set out below, the Nelson Electric Tramway Society has completed significant upgrades to its track after receiving a $1 million provincial grant in 2023. The Society is now assembling an additional $230,000 in funding to complete additional phases this spring and has requested that the city contribute $65,000. This funding amount was included in the draft financial plan presented to council earlier this winter. However, as the project is set to begin shortly, council is asked to approve this contribution now prior to approving the full budget later this spring. So there's a nice background there, talking about all of the information, and we do have a recommendation. Does somebody want to move the recommendation? Councillor Blockenberg. Is there a seconder? Councillor Page. I'm going to read the recommendation that councillor passed the following resolution: that the council approve a contribution of $65,000 from the city to the Nelson Electric Tramway Society to fund further upgrades to the tramway tracks, and further that this contribution be included in the final 2024-2028 financial plan bylaw. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Thank you, and that carries. Moving on to item number 14, information items, including correspondence and minutes of committees and commissions. Our first page there has information items, minutes of council committees and commissions. We have minutes from the NAADP, the Cultural Development Committee, and the Public Library for receipt for information. Did anybody want to pull one of those out separately? Nope. Passing in totality. Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Pinero. Any discussions of anything there that caught anybody's eye? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? And opposed? And that carries. Information items, reports, and we have, the next item is finance. We have accounts payable for the month of January, and development services building permit statistics for the month of February. Action is to receive for information. Is there a mover?
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward. Seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor of receipt of the reports? And that carries. Okay. There was no notice of motions that I was made aware of. There was no late items to the start of the meeting. And so we're now at item 17, resolution closing the meeting to the public. It is the opinion of the council that the public interests require that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the meeting of council continue under section 91E regarding the acquisition or disposition of land. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. So we'll have a